across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome. It is the home of common sense. It's 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. And thank you to Julia Hartley-Brewer. We are absolutely chocker this year. You don't want to be going anywhere. Strap in. Enjoy the ride. The government plans to cut the aid budget and increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2027 is clearly something that people say, well, a bit of common sense going on there from Team Starmer. But former Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it should be 3% to secure Europe against Russian aggression. Would you be willing to pay higher taxes for defence? We'll look at that in just a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, phone snatchers are the target of a new police crackdown, with officers now permitted to search homes without a warrant for stolen goods that are electronically tagged. Have you been on the receiving end of the phone snatcher or some other electronic device? You knew where it was because it was pinging on your little electronic radar telling you number 57 half-inched me mobile. But nobody could get in and find it, sadly. By the time they did, it was gone. And Amanda Pritchard has stepped down as NHS chief just a month after MPs accused her and her colleagues of exhibiting the worst kind of complacency. We'll have more on that story too. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So here's the thing, and a bit of context here. In an ideal world, imagine the ideal world when money was no object. We would be living in a country with a faultless healthcare system, a world-leading education system, roads without potholes, gold standard trains that were always on time, and a copper at the end of every road. But we don't have that much money, of course. Remember, the government don't have any money, they only have your money. So it's a balancing act. We get it. If we all paid 90% in tax, then our utopian dream of a hyper-efficient, world-beating gaff called the UK would be realised. We get it. But it ain't like that. There's always a balance. And that, of course, applies to defence as well. If we want to go back to the heady days when Britannia ruled the waves and we could muster a battery of tanks and a squadron of aircraft to fight any war in any place at any time, then we have to pay for it. We currently spend 2.3% of GDP on defence spending, set to rise to 2.5%, as we heard today, due to a cut, and this is the interesting bit, a cut in international aid. This is fascinating, but on a number of levels. I mean, if you want to pick up specifically on this point, if you want to look at the kind of politics and politicians we have, Keir Starmer says he will increase defence spending to 2.5%. And this will be funded by a cut in international aid. I mean, this goes against everything that's in the very marrow of the Labour Party. But they've realised they are losing the room, not by the month, but by the hour at the moment. This could be possibly one of the most sensible things they've ever done. The international aid budget was already cut back under Boris Johnson. And whilst the Labour Party pledged, and I think I'm right in saying in their manifesto, they even pledged to Labour is committed to restoring development spending at the level of 0.7% of gross national income as soon as fiscal circumstances allow. So, we know that foreign aid is not something Labour would ordinarily tinker with. But tinker with it they have. So we've now got this 2.5% guarantee. However, Boris Johnson has called for Britain to increase its defence spending to 3% to help guarantee Europe's security against Russian aggression. The former PM was speaking during a visit to Kyiv on Monday to mark the third anniversary of the Russian invasion. His trip comes ahead, of course, of Starmer's visit to Washington later this week to present Donald Trump with proposals that include Britain boosting its defence spending. Now, we've had a lot of heated debates, of course, on this of late about how the UK and Europe, in wider terms Europe, is not playing its part. Fellow Brits passionately arguing Trump is right and we are wrong. I get it. But are you willing to pay for it? 0344 499 1000. Would you be prepared to pay more tax for defence? Because that's what it ultimately comes down to. We can tinker around with international aid, and that's what Starmer has rather sensibly and prudently done on this occasion. But that takes us to 2.5%. I know there's a lot of figures being thrown around on all of this, and, you know, defence spending isn't usually the bread and butter of phone-ins and debate. It's the sort of thing your eyes gloss over a little bit, and you think, oh, let's just allow some very experienced military people to deal with that because they're kind of best placed to do the kind of spending stuff. So we don't need to think about it because we've got very impressive people with very impressive titles, with very impressive salaries, who are paid to deal with that kind of stuff. But the bottom line, if you want a greater defence budget, then you've got to pay for it. So if you are one of those that are saying, yeah, Trump's right, we should put more into the kitty, are you happy for your taxes to go up in order to pay for that? And as I said at the beginning, you could play that game on just about anything, right? I mean, you could talk about it on health and education and roads and policing, all of those areas. Yeah, we could have anything we wanted if we increase taxation. That's the only way it can ultimately happen. You can tinker here and take a little bit from that budget, but if you really want a tip-top, shiny, fit for the 21st century defence system, and you want it to be 3% of spending, you've got to put up taxes. So put your money where your mouth is. If you are in favour of more monies being spent on defence, are you therefore in favour of raising taxes accordingly? 0344 499 1000. Lines are open on that now. Let's get a word from Simon Danczuk on this story, former Labour MP, voice of common sense. He's now a member of Reform UK. Simon, good afternoon to you. And this breaking news just in the last 20 minutes that Starmer is going to increase the defence budget at the expense of the international aid budget. Who would have thought this would have come from Keir Starmer's Labour Party?
Yeah, absolutely. It's breaking news. He's just made an announcement in Parliament to that effect. And he's not had much choice, really. He's been dragged kicking and screaming into making this decision by Donald Trump, because Trump has said, listen, I'm not going to continue to defend Europe in the way that the USA has done previously. So European countries have got to increase their spending on defence. Yeah. I welcome the decision that's been made, but like Boris Johnson, I don't think it goes far enough. 2.5% isn't enough. We need to get to 3% more quickly. Starmer's suggesting we get to 3% in the next Parliament. That takes us up to 2035, I think. And that's just too far away. We need to focus much more on our defence. We've been outsourcing the defence of our country to the United States for far too long. And what we've been wasting money on is a bloated welfare state, far too much money being spent on illegal immigration, too much money being spent on foreign aid, and now far too much money being spent on net zero. So there's a lot of places we can actually cut spending and provide an opportunity to increase defence spending.
Indeed. Well, we now know Starmer's position on this. We know what the former Tory leader, as you rightly say there, Boris Johnson, is saying, 3% it should be. Let's have a listen to what the current Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, says on this very issue.
We must rebuild, and rebuild quickly. We need to increase defence expenditure significantly. But this is about more than committing to spend a particular percentage of our GDP. Of course, spend does matter, and 2.5% by 2030 was our funded commitment in the last government, but it was a down payment on more. Keir Starmer cancelled our plan and set us back. 2.5% by 2030 is now no longer sufficient.
So Starmer's gone further than what she said then, Simon, because he is going to make this happen by 2027. So the Tories, I don't know, they're not really controlling this narrative as they should be as the opposition.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. They're behind the curve on this issue, aren't they? And they hadn't done enough when they were in government. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's important to say that we can use the growth in defence spending for economic growth reasons. we have an exceptionally good, strong defence sector in the United Kingdom. We can use it to create more jobs, but it shouldn't just be about increasing spending, because that's a fool's errand, really. We have to ensure that we get value for money, whether that applies to other government departments or defence itself. So we have to invest wisely. We have to use it to create jobs, and obviously we have to use it to defend the country effectively. But we certainly have to spend more on defence, particularly now that Trump has said what he has said in relation to Ukraine and Europe more broadly.
It's interesting that this is happening ultimately because the President of the United States has initiated this debate, and Starmer is obviously going to see him next week, and or later this week. So therefore Starmer's got to have that in the bag before he gets there, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, really. You've got a president coming in here, Donald Trump. He makes a whole range of different decisions to what the previous president did, and he makes them doubly quick. And what we see is the impact, not just in the USA, but right across the Western world. Yeah. So you've got Starmer scrambling to Parliament to make an announcement today about increasing spending on defence, which he probably wouldn't have made for weeks upon weeks had it not been for Donald Trump. Fascinating time in politics, no doubt about that.
No doubt at all. Jeremy says, this message just came in, Simon, says, defence spending, Starmer is only reducing foreign aid because reform is snapping at his heels, says Jeremy in West Sussex, and I think he's probably bang on about that.
That's a really good point, actually. Starmer is really under the cosh, and he's been attacking those on the right in politics in a recent Scottish speech that he made. There's a lot of politics being played by this decision and by this announcement. Reform are leading in the opinion polls. Starmer's worried about that building even further. So this plays well for him in terms of politics, but it needs to be much more than that. Let's see if he has the wherewithal to make it really work in Britain's interest. That's the challenge he has. Yeah,
indeed. Let's move to this story, Simon. The government unveiling its new crime and policing bill in Parliament today. But do we trust Labour to tackle crime? Here's Home Secretary Yvette Cooper laying out the law.
And no one is above the law, no matter who they are. And that's why we are taking action with this new legislation that we're putting forward today, which will focus on tackling town centre crime, giving the police and communities the power to take back our town centres with action on shoplifting, on mobile phone theft, on antisocial behaviour in our town centres, but also measures that target the most serious violence of all, including violence and sexual abuse of children, also violence against women and girls, stalking and spiking measures, and knife crime, making it much harder for children to get these lethal weapons.
Well, new laws for phone theft as well is on there, Simon. It's not seen as the most serious crime, but it's a very aggravating one, and it's a massive one as well. Police can now enter properties without a warrant to recover stolen items identified via tracking apps. I mean, there could be many things this covers, but particularly mobile phones. And I don't know how many stories we've heard on this where someone's had their mobile nicked, they've looked on their laptop, or they can see where it is, and it little pings up, and they ring the police and say, look, it's definitely round here, number 53, Acacia Avenue has definitely got my mobile, and nothing happens at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of these measures I think we should welcome, like this one, which means that the police don't need a warrant to enter a property in relation to mobile phone theft and so on. I think we should welcome that. But the bigger issue here is the police's priorities. The big problem is, one, that the public don't have any faith in the police to respond or react to reports of crime. And secondly, the police just don't turn out. So if they're not going to turn out and police the situation, then what's the point of changing the law? And that's the real challenge for this government, is to get the police priorities focused not on non-crime incidents, but to focus on crime like this. They need to turn out to shoplifters, turn out to mobile phone thefts, turn out to burglaries, but they don't do that.
Indeed. And this, of course, doesn't just cover your mobile phone. It could be your bicycle. Anything that's equipped with a tracking device on it would be under this banner that the police can enter the property without a warrant. We will watch with interest. We're going to talk more about that a little later. Simon, stay with us. Simon Danczuk is with us, former Labour MP, now, of course, over there at Reform UK. Thank you to him. Over to you in a few moments' time. 0344 499 1000. Particularly that question, would you be prepared to pay more tax for defence? We'd like an answer to that. And we'll return with more from Simon in just a couple of moments, including Amanda Pritchard quitting the NHS, Rachel Reeves launching a review into lavish government spending. I wonder what gave her that idea. More on that on the way, right here on Talk.
Get your tissues, everyone. It had been a hugely difficult decision for me to stand down, she adds. She says, it's been an enormous privilege to lead the NHS in England through what has undoubtedly been the most difficult period in its history. Yeah, because the management of the NHS is so appallingly bad. We were the only healthcare system in the Western world that shut down to everyone but COVID patients, which is why we are seeing and have seen deaths spiralling for pretty much everything else. You were part of the management that shut down cancer treatment for people in their 30s and 40s.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Darren in Cambridgeshire, who says, with regards to Starling, it's just saying they will increase military spending to 2.5% of GDP. Does no one remember that the same person will look after the pensioners, working classes, farmers, or reduce the energy costs? He's a liar. He's proven he and his political party are all liars. It's very hard, isn't it? And I totally get that from Darren. When you've lost the room to such an emphatic degree as Starmer has, you do scratch your head when you hear these announcements. What should be, in any other time, you'd have gone, wow, the Prime Minister of the country has made this big announcement about defence spending, but it's come from Keir Starmer, so are we going to see it? What else is going to happen? Will something else? Well, if you take him at his word, he's going to cut the foreign aid budget. That's going to go down in order to accommodate this. That's going to reduce itself from 0.5% to 0.3% to accommodate an increase of 0.2% in defence spending. Boris Johnson says it should be 3%. If that is the case, then, I mean, that's a bigger rise, of course, to get to 3%. You'd have to pay more taxes. Would you be willing to pay more taxes to fund defence spending? 0344 499 1000. We have Simon Danczuk with us, former Labour MP, now a member of Reform UK. Let's move on to this one then, Simon. Amanda Pritchard quits as NHS chief. She's resigned after sustained pressure and scrutiny. She was meant to have led the NHS through more positive times, but it was the pandemic recovery and improvements to healthcare that was on her list, and many suggest that she didn't get anywhere near achieving any of the goals that she set, which were remarkably low in the first place. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think this illustrates the problem we have with the uniparty system that we have in the United Kingdom. And what I mean by that is that we've got people coming out West Street in celebrating Amanda Pritchard, saying what a great job she's done, goodbye, and all the rest of it. We've had Jeremy Hunt saying something similar, Sajid Javid, former health secretary, saying the same thing. Everybody celebrating Amanda Pritchard and what she's done now that she's going. The truth is she's overseeing failure within the National Health Service from what I can see. So, you know, this is the problem with the public sector and with the NHS in particular. We sort of celebrate failure. And instead of being more critical of what she's done, she's only been there 3 years. She can't have been doing that good a job, else they would have kept her on as it was. So I suspect it's right that she's gone, but let's not pretend that she's done a fantastic job. I find it immensely frustrating, actually.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't know who'd want that job for a start. I mean, it's like running the Department of Work and Pensions. You know, good luck with that. You're always going to get it wrong, even when you're convinced you've partly got it right. But she has acknowledged, she noted that there is a due to be radical reform of the size and functions of NHS England, the Department of Health and Social Care, to drive the government reform priorities, and that the step change required would best be served under new leadership. And new leadership it will be, because there's a new guy. I knew it was going to be somebody whose name was Sir something, and it is. Sir James Mackey is going to temporarily replace Pritchard as the chief executive. And a knight of the realm, what could go wrong?
Well, yeah, and I mean, she's overseen failure within the NHS, allowed wokery to go beyond belief within this particular sector. I mean, some credit to Wes Street in the current health secretary. He is challenging for change within the National Health Service, and I suspect that Amanda being moved out, is part of that process. So I do believe he has the wherewithal to make change happen, and he's doing it relatively quickly. He's only been there about 6 months. So let's give him some credit for that. But, I mean, it can't come fast enough. And let's not just have this false praise onto those that have managed to fail our NHS or any other public sector over the last year or two. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move to Rachel Reeves. She might be about to take a bit of a leaf, Simon, out of Elon Musk's Doge book. She is announcing yet another Labour review, this time targeting lavish government spending on things like food and drink, parties, private members club. And, of course, we can trust her numeracy, can't we? Because, you know, we know with someone who has a CV like this.
Well, I'm an economist. I studied economics. I got a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
There it is. She's an economist. She said it 18 times in 6 seconds.
This is the best story of the day, really. It really tickles me. I mean, one of the spending issues that they identified was that the Home Office had used over £800 for a team building exercise, which involved an escape room in Kent. My suspicion is that they're probably still in there if the Home Office or anything like they usually are. I mean, it also reminds me, I have to say, why do we need a review? I mean, just cut the spending. Half 500,000 on bars and restaurants by the Foreign Office. Why am I not surprised that it's David Lammy's department that have spent that much in just 6 months? But it does remind me of what we used to say up north in northern politics. We need a summit. We need a summit to investigate this, or rather, we need to do summit about it. That's the idea there. Well,
indeed. I mean, look, I'm not against offering a vol au vent to an ambassador that comes over from another country, or, you know, a president might want an iced fancy and a glass of fizz, you know, when they're having their kind of post-meeting soiree. I get it. There's going to be a budget for that sort of stuff, but I don't think you need to be some kind of investigative journalist or a big Westminster insider to know, spot and smell the stench of wastage that goes on in government departments. And the fact is, it's gone on forever, hasn't it? It's gone on for so long, it's been left unchecked, and no one really changes it, because each government or each head of department that comes in thinks, actually, this suits me quite well because I've got a nice budget. If I want to go off to a nice Bond Street restaurant, I can do it and nobody will say a word.
Yeah, the problem here is as well is that they want it like the private sector. So if a company in the private sector is doing well and they want to reward staff, they might spend on more luxurious items and treat staff because the company's doing well.
Yeah.
But this is the public sector. They have security of employment. They have exceptionally good pensions. They shouldn't get all those luxurious items that you might get in the private sector. There's a real distinction between the two, but these people in the civil service want it both ways, and it shouldn't be the case at taxpayers' expense.
Indeed. And this story, Simon, animal rights protesters storm the National Farmers Union conference. These are the PETA protesters, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Pesky PETA protesters crashed the conference, demanding an end to government subsidies for meat, egg and dairy industries. Here's a little look at veggie activists pushing for a plant-based world.
Thank you as well to our sponsors.
Food for the planet. Farming animals is unsustainable. We must switch to plant-based. Oxford University said the most effective thing we can do to combat climate change.
That does kind of looks like something from a CBBC drama, doesn't it? When the kids went protesting, stop the meat, we want more plants. I don't think it was the most effective. It wasn't violent. Look, we live in a democracy. If, somebody wants to jump up and wave a banner, then until they're dragged away, they're allowed to give it a go. But good luck with that protest. Banning meat? What's going on?
Well, she's a very well-spoken protester, I'll give her that.
They usually are. Have you noticed that? There's a bit of a correlation there.
Absolutely, yeah. No, they can afford to protest, yeah. I have a problem with PETA, actually. They were one of the big campaigners around fur.
Yeah, back in the day.
Fur. And back in the day. But they're on a trajectory, aren't they? As many of these campaigners often are, with trans rights as well. And where they want to get us, and we're seeing it now, is never mind banning fur. They don't want us to affect animals in any way. They want us to eat plants only. That's not where the British public are at. And yet we give these organisations like this, we give them charitable status, we allow them to do what they want to do. It's unacceptable, really.
And you can't make a coat or a pair of shoes out of a lettuce, can you? I mean, come on, let's be honest. I mean, it wouldn't last very long.
Well, the impact on the environment is a real one, isn't it? Because if you don't have natural fur or leather or whatever else, then you're creating clothes out of chemicals, and that's disastrous in many respects.
Listen, Simon, on that point, thank you. Simon Danczuk, former Labour MP, now, of course, a member of Reform UK. Your thoughts on all of those stories? Anything else you want to throw into the bag as well? 0344 499 1000. In particular, would you be prepared to pay more tax for defence? Starmer has increased defence spending just a shade, 2.5%. It will go to. But that, of course, is small fry compared to what is needed. Boris Johnson, Mr Starmer's predecessor, says it should be 3%. Now, Starmer has sort of raided the international aid budget for this, which will be popular in some circles, devastating in others, depending on where I suppose you sit politically. But if you were to get it to 3% or even 3.5%, you'd probably have to put up taxes. And there's a lot of big voices out there at the moment saying, yeah, we should pay our fair. We're not paying our fair share. Sort of almost siding with the Trump line, which might notionally be correct. But to get to those kind of heady numbers, you're going to have to pay a bit more tax. So money where your mouth is, kids. Would you pay more tax to increase money for defence? 0344 499 1000. We'll get a political voice in a moment in the shape of one former Foreign Secretary and a military voice as well. Stand by for all of that. Over to you too. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 1:30. So the Prime Minister has announced a boost to defence spending by cutting the UK aid budget. This won't be without its critics, of course. There will be natural controversy around this. Keir Starmer says it will rise to 2.5% by 2027, with aid reduced from 0.5% of GDP to 0.3%. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister said.
So starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament. And let me spell that out, Mr. Speaker. That means spending £13.4 billion more on defence every year from 2027.
Well, an impressive number in isolation. It follows, of course, calls from Boris Johnson, who warns it needs to be 3% in order to secure Europe against Russian aggression. In a moment, Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst, will join us. First, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, former Foreign Secretary. Sir Malcolm, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
To coin a phrase, has the Prime Minister played a blinder?
Well, I'm not sure a blinder. That would have been something quite unexpected. Perhaps the timing was unexpected, but it was inevitable that we would move substantially in this direction, and I congratulate the Prime Minister in doing so. I think this is very important because it's very important not just that the money is going to be provided to improve our defence capability, it's also necessary for the public as a whole, all of us, to understand, those who are not directly or indirectly involved, that we are all part of this crisis. That because of the new position of the American government under President Trump, and without the guaranteed assurance that our defence will be shared by them in the way it's been in the past, that really would be an incentive. Whatever happens in Ukraine, Putin has been seen to be a man who's prepared to invade neighbouring territories if he thinks he can get away with it. So I'm very pleased that we've started this process, but I don't actually think it's gone quite as far as it should.
So you agree with Mr. Johnson, Boris Johnson, that 3% would be a more realistic and more obvious figure to look towards?
It's not very meaningful to talk for most people to hear words about 2.3%, 3%, 4%. Yeah. What do these percentages mean? What I will say is at the moment we're spending 2.3%. Poland, one of our NATO colleagues, one of our European allies, much poorer country than Britain, is spending 4% of its much smaller economy on their armed forces. And if Poland can do that, and the Baltic states can do that, the United Kingdom's are much.
Well, I mean, one might argue there are obvious geographic reasons why their spending might be greater than ours.
That is a perfectly fair comment, but it means that we've got to catch up at least with where they are. Because the Russians themselves, Putin's government, are not spending 2%, 3%, 4%. They're spending over 6% of their defence, of their budget on defence. Yeah. And over roughly half of all government spending in Russia at the moment is on the million troops that are fighting in Ukraine.
Would any of this have happened? Would Mr. Starmer have made this move had Donald Trump not been breathing down his neck, bearing in mind they have a meeting later this week?
You know, I'm no friend of Donald Trump. I think he's a terrible president. I think he's a reckless man. But of course, you know, sometimes even the most reckless and dangerous people can have an effect that might not have happened in the time it has happened. Yeah. I think one has to acknowledge the reality that it is. It's not that Trump did this deliberately for this particular reason. He is reckless by nature, he's unpredictable by nature, and he's disloyal by nature. And therefore the rubbish he's been talking about as to the Russians not causing this war and Zelensky being a dictator, that's completely absurd. But sometimes in the midst of all this chaos, there has to be a realization in the democratic countries that if America has changed under Trump, we have to respond to that.
And this would not have been on the table, this debate. It wouldn't have been at this stage.
There would have been a debate. No, not quite right. I think not just the armed forces themselves, but all those who take a serious interest in defence and national security. I was Defence Secretary myself in the 1990s before I was Foreign Secretary. All of us who've been involved in this territory have known for and have been arguing for some time that you had to have a real increase in defence expenditure. It had been cut far too far, and it has to increase. So the debate was going on. But, you know, unless you're in government, you don't have the heft, you don't have the means of delivering that view, that judgment, into reality. And the Conservative government were doing their best, and the Labour government were not doing quite so well, but now they've caught up. And that has to be acknowledged.
And Sir Malcolm, what is your take on the way this is going to be funded? So it's the UK aid budget that is going to take a hit on this one. Now, previously, Mr Johnson had had a tinker around the edges with the UK aid budget, a bit of a fallout, and Labour, you know, almost lost their minds when this happened. Here's Sir Keir Starmer doing pretty much the same thing.
No, I think that's a fair comment, but I think the debate's a much wider one than just this particular announcement today, because what we are seeing already happening, the new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, the French government and the United Kingdom government, these are the three European states with a serious military capability. So if Europe is going to be able to protect itself, it's Britain, France and Germany. And we are already committed to working together. And what is being looked at is not just how you fund it by cutting something somewhere else in your budget. There are very important discussions going on at the moment about the possibility of creating a rearmament bank, is the term that is used, whereby national governments would invest a certain sum. And because they have great credit ratings, that new bank would be able to borrow very much, 10 times as much money, and that could be committed to defence expenditure in a much more economic way and beneficial way, which would not involve the same sort of cuts in national budgets. That's one example. There are other talks going on. We already have control over 2.5 billion of Russian reserves, and I'm damned if we should see that going back to Russia. That can be used to help Ukraine, its own reconstruction, and that is something that does not involve a burden on British taxpayers.
And what's your take on the wider issue of Ukraine and the war ending, coming to an end, or at least the beginning of the end? Listening to Mr Trump when he was meeting with Mr Macron yesterday, I think there were a couple of times in that sort of slightly curious, often a little clunky, but nonetheless compelling viewing moment in the Oval Office when they were chatting. And Mr Trump very casually talks about, you know, this will be signed off by the end of the week. And I know that's sort of that's the way he rolls, right? But
originally it was going to be in 24 hours.
24 hours, yeah.
Now it's 2 or 3 weeks. No, but put that on one side, the timing. That's typical Trump rhetoric that we don't pay attention to. No, but what I do pay attention to, and what I entirely support and share, is the view that this war, if it can be done in a responsible way, needs to be brought to an end as soon as possible. And because what has become already apparent on the battlefront is not only that the Ukrainians are under great pressure and are not able to recover all the territory they lost militarily, but the Russians are also in a similar mess. You know, although they're making some advances, it is so microscopic that someone has calculated it would take them 14 years at this rate for their troops to reach Kiev, the Ukrainian capital. Wow. That's not going to happen. So the war has to be brought to an end. But the country most affected by this is, of course, Ukraine itself. And what I despise the way Trump is behaving is the idea that their future can be negotiated without them having an equal position at the table discussing their own future. I'm afraid the comparisons made between now and Chamberlain and Hitler disposing of Czechoslovakia in 1938, they're not exact parallels. There are often big differences, but there's an uncomfortable comparison that can legitimately be made. So I'm pleased that Trump just yesterday announced that President Zelensky, whom he's been attacking and saying the most terrible things about, is being invited to Washington, to the White House, to meet him next week, we're told. If that happens, and if it's a meaningful discussion, then some of the damage that Trump has done might very slowly be able to be rectified. But I'm not optimistic. Trump's whole style is to say he wants to be chums with Putin, and we do not yet know for certain how much he's going to abandon Ukraine's legitimate interests in order to achieve that. So that's why great care must be taken. So, the final point, I'm delighted on this issue. In Britain, there's all-party support for Ukraine. I mean, this is not a party matter.
True.
Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, all strongly support the thrust of the current policy.
Some might argue that, you know, the Trump position, it's clearly unconventional. He shoots from the hip. He doesn't have, you know, spads around him typing up pre-rehearsed lines and platitudes that are nice and clinical and full of diplomatic language and the patois of the international political elites, etc. He tells it like it comes into his mind and he just says it. Or does he? Because many would argue that actually what he does here, the bit about, you know, Zelensky is a dictator, which clearly a demonstrably stupid thing to say, but the appearance of siding with Putin, that could just be an illusion, right? That could be his idea of getting this two around the table.
Yeah, sure. I only wish we could legitimately come to that conclusion, that this was an illusion. But it's not an illusion, because we've known Trump's been around a long time. And he was president for 4 years. And even then, we know that first of all, he looks at every political issue as if it was a business deal. And when businessmen are trying to do deals, quite properly, they're concerned, will it be profitable or will they make an economic loss? That's the only thing that matters. Trump applies the same criteria to international relations with other countries. And that is wickedly stupid, because the reality is that when you're dealing with international crises, you cannot ask the Ukrainians, for example, just to add up which will be more profitable economically. They're trying to save their country. Putin wants to destroy Ukraine as an independent country and make it a subservient province to Russia. Now, you can't deal with that as if it's an acceptable part of a business deal. And that is Trump's basic, what makes him so dangerous a man in the White House. But we have to work with him, because for the next 3-4 years, he will be the most powerful man in the world. Absolutely. And that's something we can't pretend is otherwise the case.
Sir Malcolm Rifkind, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Sir Malcolm Rifkind, former Foreign Secretary and former Defence Secretary, with us on the programme. Let's get a word from Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. Simon, good afternoon to you. Fair play to Malcolm Rifkind. He knows both terrains rather well. Doesn't mean he's right on everything. Very suspicious of Trump, but he did acknowledge that, you know, Trump is unconventionally the person that's got this thing moving. What's your response, though, to the increase in the defence budget? Is that likely to be something that makes a bit of a difference, or is it game-changing?
It's not game-changing. Good afternoon to you all. And I enjoyed listening to Sir Malcolm. It's not game-changing, and I think that's where the pressure to increase the defence budget to 3%, 4% is going to come, because I think the recognition will come very quickly that this will make a difference. It'll stop some of the endless pressure within the MOD, constantly looking for cuts. But in terms of substantive change, we're talking about near decades of neglect of particularly the conventional military budget. Then increasing to 2.5% by 2027 is not going to make that difference. And that, unfortunately, is what we need. We know already that Putin's 8% of its GDP, as Sir Malcolm said, nearly 40%, 50% of their defence, of their overall budget is there. That means that Putin is ready to go, if he has a ceasefire this year, and conduct more adventurism within 2 to 5 years. You know, 2 years' time is 2027. So 2.5% by 2027 doesn't really seem to me to make a difference. We need something rather more substantive and rather more game-changing. I'll give you one example of that, if I may, very quickly.
Yes, please.
The Danish Chief of Defence Staff has been told by the Danish Prime Minister, buy. Literally, that's the message they've got out. Go out, basically, and rearm. That's the Danes. Now, we reckon that we are a leading military power. We need that sort of attitude, and that means the Treasury needs to unlock more than a percentage increase of 2.5% by 2027.
We know Starmer. Indeed, Starmer is off to the White House, of course. We know that he's been having, you know, some in-depth dialogue with Macron around this issue. The smart money would suggest he's been doing the same with the new incumbent in Germany, who, by all accounts, might be also likely to increase spending. If he goes to see Trump and he can say, look, there's 3 of us here, we're all big players on the European stage. Between us, you know, you can clearly see that your previous remarks about the ineptitude of Europe in terms of defence are now misplaced, because we're the new kids on the block and we're on it. Is that going to work, and is he even likely to say that?
Well, I think he's going to try and sell that. I mean, I think President Trump, and Sylvester Malcolm was correct, he's very much transactional. He sees this in terms of the deal. He also respects strength. He does not respect weakness. But I think he's going to be looking for something more than that. And I think we need to deliver more than that, not just in terms of pure money, but a different way to do our own business. And I'll give you again, simple again, which is the relative amount of money spent by the Russians and ourselves. We talk about percentage of GDP. Actually, they spend about $145 billion a year. We spend about $80 billion a year on defence. Look what they get for their money and look what we get for our money. So along with those conversations about having a European rearmament bank, we need a completely different defence industry that delivers quality and quickly. What we have at the moment is like it takes 15 years to do a simple change of a rifle. I mean, that's just not good enough. Not against a priority and not against a demand, which means we might have to end up fighting within 2 to 5 years. That's the imperative that we need to get across. And I think that's what Donald Trump's going to be saying to Prime Minister Starmer.
And just very briefly, Simon, what is it we need? More boots on the ground, more planes, more tanks? What is it?
Yeah, and everything. Modern warfare is infinitely complex, but, there are some basics that are not there. We need to stop hemorrhaging from the armed forces. We need to ensure that recruiting works across the board, which means you probably need to pay our people more. We need to ensure that our stuff that's currently in storage can be got out of storage and can be used. And then we need kit and equipment that they can use within 2 to 5 years. So I'm afraid it's a really comprehensive package of change, and we need to have them quickly.
Simon, thank you for your time as ever. Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst, with us here on the programme. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. You want to pick up on any aspect of what you've heard from him and also from Sir Malcolm Rifkind too. That question, would you be prepared to pay more tax for defence? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Get your tissues, everyone. It had been a hugely difficult decision for me to stand down, she adds. She says, it's been an enormous privilege to lead the NHS in England through what has undoubtedly been the most difficult period in its history. Yeah, because the management of the NHS is so appallingly bad. We were the only healthcare system in the Western world that shut down to everyone but COVID patients, which is why we are seeing and have seen deaths spiralling for pretty much everything else. You were part of the management that shut down cancer treatment for people in their 30s and 40s.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 10 to 2. Let's go to Louise in Kent as our first caller. How are you doing, Louise? Louise disappeared into the ether. This comes from Clayton in Dartford, who says, no, I don't want to pay more tax for defence. I want less of my tax wasted. First would be the subsidised bars and restaurants in the Houses of Parliament. Those earning $91,000 a year can afford those meals. Second would be cut the 323 attendance allowance per day for the Lords. Just binge them a fiver. Finally, illegal immigrants, don't even give them a hearty welcome. I should say, slightly in defence, it's not a free... I think they're non-profit restaurants. Having been in the press gallery for a number of years at Westminster, you still pay for your stuff. But you don't really... I don't ever remember thinking, oh, God, this is really... It's obviously cheaper. So I think it was with no profit. As for the House of Lords, I mean, cut it in half as well, right? Let's get rid of 50% of the darn place. I certainly would welcome a Doge department that would do that, but no one ever will. Sean in Grimsby says, if the war in Ukraine has shown us anything, it's that you need lots and lots of men to stop bullets, and good luck getting this generation of men to fight. Fair point. Let's go back. We've got Andrew in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this?
It's very straightforward. It's political. What's happened here
Yep.
is he's going out to America. He's got to go there with more money. He's got to show willing. Poland went first to the US. They spend 4.7, almost 5%.
Yep.
We spend nothing. So the reality of this is, if you want the air above us, the seas around us, and us to be safe, you've got to spend 5 or 8. We spend too much on foreign aid. We don't have to worry about foreign aid because defence is foreign aid. They can either have food or we'll defend them. And he's going to make a fool of himself because Trump was just going to say to him, the bloke from Poland was here, he's spending 5. And you think you've won, you think there should be a mariachi band and a ticket parade for an extra 5%.
So how would you fund it, Andrew? Would you just look for natural wastage? Because I've got a feeling that the bean counters would say, that's a good idea, but there ain't, believe it or not, there's not enough natural wastage to cover what we need.
Yeah, you've got 260 billion going out on benefits. Just cut that straight to 130 and just halve it. People that are suffering from cancer, people that come up, they're the people we should be supporting. Yeah. Everything else, just be brutal with it. That's where you get the big chunk of change from. And then the foreign aid, we just have to say, no, it's done at this moment in time. We can't, there's no point in us sending you money because we're sending you money on a Ponzi scheme because we won't be here in 18 months if the way things are going.
Got it.
So we have to just end it. And you have to make bold decisions like that now. We're at war with Russia. They killed people in Salisbury. They killed people in the Emirates Stadium. They're tearing up the infrastructure under the sea by dragging out the cables. This is not a game anymore, Ian.
No, it's not a game, and it's, it looks as if it could get worse, right? I mean, at a time... Remember, I don't know how old you are, Andrew, but certainly in the 80s, I can remember, that whole possible threat of nuclear war, people talking about building bunkers in their garden, Two Tribes was playing on the radio, Threads was being shown on TV, this looked as if it could be a bit dicey. Then it all calmed down, and Reagan came along, and Thatcher became the Iron Lady as a result of all of that. And, we were at peace. Now, we're back there, right?
Yeah, but we sleepwalked and we've lived on American dollar for food. We've had sweets and crisps and down the...
And we've lost your line, Andrew, but I've got it. And listen, it's how you spend your money, right? Do you know, I didn't know you could do this until yesterday when I was looking at the HMRC website, and you click into your own account if you're freelance or self-employed, and many of you listening to this will be. And obviously it tells you how much tax or how much you... Yeah, it tells you how much you're going to be paying in tax for the year that you've just done. But I didn't know they do your own breakdown to tell you how much your money specifically will go into which departments. And the top of that list is welfare. And that doesn't include the pension, by the way. Top of the list was welfare. So most of my tax, by a good measure, will go to the welfare budget of this country. Now, I don't mind contributing to the welfare budget. We have to contribute to the welfare budget. There's lots of good reasons why we do. However, I didn't expect it to be right up there in such emphasis. So when I saw how much I specifically, and I guess it's sort of hypothetical, but yeah, of that amount of money that I will spend in totality in paying HMRC, this is the amount that I will spend on welfare. To see it linked to your own name is quite something. Did you know you could do that? Louise is back with us in Kent. What are your thoughts, Louise?
Yes.
Are you happy to pay more tax for more defence?
Well, yes. In fact, yes, I would be. But, Teresa, I can't guarantee where my tax goes. But also, look, I did mental arithmetic when I was at school. That's what we did in our age. And if you look at what we've given, 8 billion to Ed Miliband's NISO, his energy thing, 22 billion for his carbon capture, 11 billion for overseas climate aid. That adds up to 41 billion. that would be 3 times the amount that actually Keir Starmer wants to put in. That would start a good conversation. It would also, if you stop the carbon capture, help the Peter lot who want us all to eat plants, because CO2 is plant food.
Yeah.
And the planet is greening up anyway. So the whole thing is utterly bonkers. I am aware as well, I am a bit bothered because at the moment, nuclear-capable bombers have gone up over Ukraine today, hammering it again. NATO have had to scramble everything. And they've had a massive drone attack in one of the largest of the war. And it would strike me at the moment that Putin is going out of his way to damage Ukraine as much as possible before he's being potentially forced to stop.
Yeah, it's like breaking some kneecaps, isn't it, before you get to the point where you've got to stop entirely. I hear it. Louise, thank you for that. I guess we've all got our own little wish list, haven't we, of which bits we would, or where we would take money from. A lot of you getting in touch saying net zero. We can't do that, of course, because we are saving the planet. And who doesn't want to save the planet? Because we're all going to die because of our wicked ways, our meat eating, our wood burning fires, those disgusting cars that you drive. Yeah, who's going to pay for that malarkey? What's going to come out of thin air? So we can't touch that. International aid was sacrilege, but Keir Starmer has gone, I'm going to have a little dip into the old petty cash to fund the increase in defence spending. Boris Johnson says, well, it's no good. It's got to be 3%. Previous caller to this programme just said should be more like 5%. Where do we get that money from? Would you pay more tax to increase defence spending? Really simple question. I think the answer is a little more complicated. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the latest news headlines at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Indeed, 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of common sense. A lot to get through in this section. The government planning to cut the aid budget to increase spending on defence. They're taking it to 2.5% by 2027. It's currently 2.3%. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it needs to be 3% to secure Europe's security against Russian aggression. But would you be willing to pay higher taxes for defence. We'll keep the lines open on that one. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has suggested the UK may need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights if it hinders national interests, criticising the treaty for limiting the UK's ability to control borders and respond to threats. And we've seen some absolute bonkers decisions of late in terms of what the ECHR has allowed in terms of people being able to stay in this country. And Energy Secretary Ed Miliband is blaming a surge in gas prices for Britain's rising energy bills and is urging households and companies to back net zero to bring costs down. This is sort of feels like a little snake oil territory, right? Because he told me at the election he was going to bring, was it 600 quid a year or something? We'll bring the cost down. He said, it never happened. In fact, they're just going up and up and up again. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This from David in the Cotswolds, who says, with income tax and national insurance and the VAT I pay on everything, I work out that I'm paying around 53% of tax already. The government wants me to pay more? Not a chance. Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you add up the actual amount. I mean, it's obscene that in the 21st century, you would hand over more than half of your money to the government. That, and I know, look, hypotheticals and all the rest of it, that I would always argue is a broken system. I think it's horrendous that that is the case. And when you start bolting on, I was talking to my accountant about this, and it was, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when we were talking through the numbers of what you actually pay when you're paying a substantial top rate of tax, as well as the national insurance contribution. You factor it all in, you've got your VAT in, and goodness knows what else. And you think, what? How did we get to a stage where we're in this sort of 60% almost territory, as David alludes to there? I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. We have Oscar Redrop back with us, former special advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Oscar, afternoon to you and welcome back, sir.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm good as gold at this end. Nice to have you with us. And let's start with an area that, of course, involves your former boss. But first, let's get the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. This big announcement of a rise in spending for defence, taking it from 2.3% to 2.5% by 2027. Here's a reminder of what the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons around about an hour ago.
So starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament. And let me spell that out, Mr. Speaker. That means spending £13.4 billion more on defence every year from 2027.
What got me about looking at that clip, Oscar, nothing to do with the main story. I was just noticed Angela Rayner in the background, who, you know, under a previous existence would have been shouting warmongering scum to anybody that dared to talk about raising money on expense. There she is as the bastion of sense and modern government, Deputy Prime Minister. Clearly changed her tune quite a bit. But let's not worry about Ms Rayner. Let's talk about Keir Starmer and your former boss, Boris Johnson, because, of course, Starmer has raised it. Not a bad move on his part in terms of how he's funding it. But, of course, Boris Johnson would have said 3%. It's not anywhere near enough, this 2.5. You've got to be looking at 3% to be even serious about what is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's completely objectively, it is a crucial step in the right direction. However, my former boss is right. I mean, and the 3% isn't just plucked out of thin air randomly. 3% is where you want to be in terms of, in very simple terms, where you want to be in terms of actually being able to do new stuff and actually increase capacity, as opposed to not hemorrhaging, losing, or merely just maintaining. So that 3% isn't a random figure. And that is absolutely where we need to be at this moment in time. And I also think strategically, it was a slightly odd choice to make this announcement today, because ahead of Thursday, ahead of that meeting with Trump, I don't know, but it's highly possible that this number, this figure today that's been announced, isn't enough for Trump.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that happens when he walks in that room in the Oval Office is President Trump says, yeah, I saw your announcement. That's not going to cut it, mate. That's not enough.
And he would say that. He would say that in front of the cameras, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, Ian. And so for me, that's a risk that's being taken. Yeah. I think it would be better to get your ducks in a row privately, kind of covertly on this issue if you're Keir Starmer, and then you actually have a bit of a negotiating tool there. You can have a conversation with Trump and say, look, this is where we're thinking. We'd like to get to 3%. Maybe we can end up here. How do you feel about that? Is that going to allay some of your fears and concerns that you rightfully have? And so I think he's potentially setting himself up for a fall. That being said, I think it's really smart in terms of hacking into the foreign aid budget, and in pure political terms, that is tanks firmly parked on, the lawn of reform, and naturally a lot of the right of the Conservative Party. So in that sense, smart politics from Starmer, and if he gets the shrilly kind of left of the Labour Party backbenchers screaming at him on stuff like that, he'll see that as a win, if anything.
Yeah, I would have thought so. And this idea of dipping into the international aid budget, I think I'm right. We've had so many prime ministers, Oscar, I'm losing track here, but I think it was Boris, of course, that did cut international aid a tad, to much criticism at the time from people like David Cameron, and there was no love lost there, but you take the point. So is that a controversial area to dip your toe into?
I mean, it really isn't in the world we now live in. I mean, the game has completely changed. The weather changes in politics, every few days it feels like at times. And you have to accept the new reality that security, defence, in what, many, you forget, many defence secretaries like Grant Shapps, and that feels like 100 years ago, admittedly, but only a couple of years ago described as being in a pre-war age. And things have only moved in a more dangerous direction since then. So you have to get your house in order. You have to set priorities. And, it's interesting when you talk to your callers, which is something that you do very well on the show, and engaging their thoughts and theories on this stuff. But in terms of, do we require more tax spend to pay for something that is so crucial like defence security? And actually, even on an issue that is so monumentally huge, like the defence of our country in the world, asking people to dip into their back pockets to pay for it. And I know that's not what was announced today, but I understand the contradiction. I get why it's all very well me coming on your show saying we need to get to 3%, we need, quicker and sooner. But at what point do you start asking people to dip into their pockets? And that is such a tough sell politically.
Let's move to the Conservative leadership. Kemi Badenoch suggesting that the Tories must be willing to disengage from international law if it's hindering national interest. She's, of course, primarily talking about the European Convention on Human Rights. Here we've seen a lot of, really kind of bonkers cases, Oscar, of late. I think the Telegraph have been plucking one out a day at the moment. People who were able to stay or have the right to stay in the United Kingdom despite either being a criminal or despite having no good reason to be here. And some of the reasons, sex offenders who still have a right to a family life, some bloke that couldn't go back home because his kid didn't like the chicken nuggets in his home country. I mean, the miserable list goes on. So this is Kemi kind of, again, eating into Reform UK territory. I mean, there's a couple of takeaways from this. One is that no chicken nugget pun intended. A couple of takeaways from this. Of course, one of them being that if this is about getting into the sort of Reform UK territory, and Mr. Starmer's attempt to dip into international aid was also parking his tanks on the Reform UK territory. It does show us, if nothing else, the dominance, perhaps, or maybe the fear the two mainstream parties have of Nigel Farage.
Oh, they're completely conscious of the sensibilities and the quite dynamic. I mean, Reform in musical terms, they're a punk band at the moment, and that in terms of the status quo, is utterly terrifying, because Reform are able to tap in and punch in a way that the more established parties, because of the way actually just the how rigid they have to be sometimes, to their fault, are not able to. And this is a really, really good example. What I would say, however, and I like the fact that the Conservative leader, Kemi, is talking on these terms now about, the suspicion that the international organisations and lawyers are not always acting, and of course, the manifestation of that being the ECHR in many cases, not acting in our interests. I like the fact she's talking on those terms. But during her speech today, there was a bit of a language problem at times for me, because it's talking about, Western civilization, these quite almost academic, I would say, kind of language. And you do feel like, who are you talking to here? And yes, you're doing it at a think tank, Policy Exchange, and you're doing it to think tankers maybe, or you're doing it to, writers of the right and that kind of intelligentsia, if you like. And I sometimes think, you need to be able to communicate it in a more real world way for people. The ECHR, a lot of people won't even know what that is. And absolutely fair play.
100%.
They've got busy lives and they've got jobs and families to feed and all the rest of it. But this is actually about, if we can't get a deterrent in place to solve illegal immigration and the problems it brings this country, we probably do need to leave this organisation that absolutely renders that deterrent pointless. We saw that with Rwanda.
Yeah.
Ultimately that was, left-leaning lawyers who grounded those flights, pulled people off them and made it impossible. And so you need to talk about it on those terms. It isn't just, Western civilization and the fight for what's right. A lot of people go, what? I mean, so can you talk my language, please? I mean, how's that going to improve my life?
It's funny you were talking about there. I was trying to think about, and having listened to Boris being interviewed this morning, that business of selling a policy, which was something as an advisor to the then Prime Minister you wouldn't have had to really have struggled too much with, because, the one thing Boris Johnson could do really well was sell a policy. He was, his ability to impart optimism was almost unparalleled. And I know some would say, well, there's a bit of smoke and mirrors going on there, because you've still got to be able to say something that's going to happen. And sometimes he did get himself into trouble a little bit, but he was just very good at that stuff. He was just very good at saying, right, gang, almost. I slightly sounded like him there, didn't I? This is what we're going to do. And he went out and did it. You didn't have to worry too much that he had the ability to sell something.
Yeah, and who's left in that Boris-shaped vacuum? The other frontline politician who was brilliant at communicating sometimes difficult problems and issues of the day is Nigel Farage.
Yeah,
and he completely is. And I think if the Conservative Party get too flowery, wishy-washy, kind of playing to the gallery of think tanks and all the rest of it in Westminster, then Farage will just continue to surge in the polls. We need to make things real for people. We need to understand their issues of the day. And I would absolutely argue that leaving, and this is why she's done a good job today in terms of identifying the problem, but leaving things like the ECHR are a really, really important step to solving those day-to-day issues for people like illegal immigration.
Yeah. Finally, let's talk about Jonathan Reynolds. For those who don't know, he's the current business secretary. Used to be a top barrister and QC. Oh, sorry, no, he wasn't that. He was a solicitor. No, he wasn't that either. So he was never a solicitor. Went on a training course, thought he was going to be one, dropped out to become an MP, but accidentally left it on his CV by saying, I was a solicitor. He's described himself as a man that was a trainee solicitor. Now he's actually acknowledged that. He says it's no huge deal. I tend to disagree with him on that. I think pretending you're a solicitor is quite a big deal, actually.
It is quite a big deal, and I think the real issue here for me is, human beings are human beings. Sometimes we over-embellish and we make, or even forgetting that, we make mistakes. What I don't like that's happened here, which I think is the real story and cuts to the heart of it, is blaming it on members of staff, which was the initial excuse made that it was members of his team that referenced it incorrectly. And I think that's the true, what you're speaking to there in terms of the character, rather than the over embellishment, or, you know, if you want to call it the lie on your CV. That to me is kind of worse. You know, I work for someone who, in Boris, without dragging us all back there again, who took, you know, when we think back to Partygate, took a lot of flack for things that he may not have directly been involved in. And never once blamed the people that worked for him or was around at that time. And, you know, you look at something like this, and senior politicians who are so readily happy to chuck junior members of staff under the bus. I mean, that's the problem to me. Do we want people like that running our country, that level of cowardice? I'm not sure.
Fair point to finish on. Oscar, always great to have you on. We will speak again. Thank you, Oscar Redrop, former special advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Over to you on any of that. And, of course, that big question of whether you'd be prepared to pay more tax for defence. Starmer's hiked it up a bit by dipping into the international aid budget, but it probably needs to go further. There's a lot of loud voices over the last few days been going, yeah, come on, Trump's right, UK, spend more money. Well, are you going to pay extra in your tax to make that happen? 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on that. Our lines are open. We're going to be back with more comments in just a couple of moments. Before we do, it is time to now find out how you could be in with a chance of winning, are you ready for this, £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Confident are you that Donald Trump, in talks with Putin and Zelensky, separately it would appear so far, could bring about peace in Ukraine within weeks, as Donald Trump claims? And what would that peace look like?
Now, the important thing, really important thing, is that President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are brought into these discussions. What would be an absolute disaster, very reminiscent of when Czechoslovakia was sold down the road in 1938, if a deal was done over the head of Ukraine, over the head of Zelensky.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's go back to your calls. 21 minutes after 2 o'clock. Oh, and comments as well. This in from Howard in Suffolk, who says there's only one answer to defence spending and Russia and Trump negotiations. Wait and see. Nothing any commentator or ex-government minister says will make a scrap of difference. It won't make any difference, but it is interesting to see where you think the smart money is on all of this. One comes in here from Gary. Ian, been thinking about the 2.5% of GDP. If I earn £25,000 per year, 2.5% of those earnings are 625 quid. Now, that is cost of coffee money on the train to work, essentially peanuts. 4 or 5% must be the minimum. Great number crunching from Gary. Thank you for that. And here's one that comes in from No Name Given. Could we pay an extra £1 a week? That's an extra quid per week. Should be a separate tax on wage slips, clearly labelled defence. Is it time to look after the armed forces we have now and develop future defence? £1 a week from everybody would raise millions and fast. That's a really good point as well. I'm interested in the cost of coffee analogy. I remember somebody, I can't remember who it was, a while back, got in touch with us and was making that analogy about energy spending. If you look at, or water rates or something of that nature, and the comparison to a coffee a day, a small latte in Costa is, I think, £3.65. It's quite a lot of money for a cup of coffee, right? And you make it for almost diddly at home. £3.65. When you discover that your water is £3.65 a day, not even that, you go, well, wow, my water rates are terrible. It's the cost of a coffee. I mean, you take that every day. You're going to have all of your sanitation addressed, everything in your house, running water, clean running water, the ability to flush your loo, run a bath, have a shower, all of that is going to happen for the cost of a cup of coffee? Wow. It's not a bad marker in the contemporary world we're in. Mike is in Stoke-on-Trent on defence spending. Mike, what do you got for us? Hi.
Hey, Ian. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Well, really quickly. Yeah. Would I pay extra? Yes, if it went on defence.
Yeah.
Do I think we need to spend it? No.
Okay.
I'm probably going to have the police around here before very long, but my suggestion is take Mr. Miliband down to Beachy Head, give him an umbrella, and tell him to jump off.
And see if the wind... Well, we don't want anyone dying, but, I mean, maybe he'll fly like Mary Poppins.
Well, if you give him a golf umbrella, he's got a 50-50 chance, hasn't he?
And if anyone's going to fly like Poppins, it's going to be Miliband, I would suggest.
Right. I mean, when we're giving 34 billion away or whatever it is on something that, to be honest, I think is a complete waste of time, we put out 0.9 of 1% of carbon footprint. The whole of the EU in 1 year puts out less than what India puts out. And I think it's in less than a month.
Yeah.
What chance have we got?
But don't you realise, Mike, we're all going to die, like in 2 years' time, if we don't sort this thing out.
Look, at my age, 2 years is a good extension.
You'll take that. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
No,
get the 4x4s out.
They're going on about defence spending, yet we do need to spend it.
Yeah.
He's announced the upsurge in it, mainly because he's going to see Trump. He's trying to get brownie points. But the point is, with what we are spending on this carbon capture in comparison to what we put out, you could fund the NHS, you could fund welfare, you could certainly fund the military. I mean, to my mind, it's a no-brainer. This world has been around for a couple of million years.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there is enough, if nothing else, we would have to accuse our political masters, Ed Miliband being right at the top, of playing a game of utter tomfoolery here with our minds, because if he wants this experiment or this money or whatever initiative, whatever he wants to call net zero, then he's got to sell it a little better than he currently is, right? Because you or I should not be able to give all of these examples as to why this looks all shades of crazy. There should be a very rigid answer that involves more than a little bit of a leap of faith on behalf of the electorate who are being asked to cough up, whose electricity bills or energy bills have just gone up again, talking about nearly 2k a year just to heat your home and cook some sausages. The world is not straightforward, and I think it's incumbent on politicians to give, if you're asking for that amount of commitment from taxpayers, at the same time as you rightly say, countries like India and China, I know China do, more than apparently when it comes to solar panels than anyone else, but they also create more jip and hassle in the environment than anyone else. We need answers and we need them fast. Listen, Mike, I've got to move, but thank you for that. Mike in Stoke-on-Trent. David is in Exeter on defence spending. David, what have you got for us? Hi.
Yeah, hi, Ian. Well, I think this rather than Keir Starmer stepping up, as what Trump and Pete Hesketh has been saying, really what we've got here is it's a mere twitch. It isn't a step at all, because the magnitude of increase that he's talking in 2027. So the increase that he's on about is so minimal.
Yep.
And we're talking about jam tomorrow in 2 years' time. I mean, if it was appropriate, it would be a big increase, and it would be a big increase now, like 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, not 2 years.
Sure.
It's not relevant. So whether it's a question of him, not listening to what America are saying or not, I think that's probably what's going on. He's not really listening. He's playing some sort of petty politics with this. But, of course, the war in the context now in Europe, so Europe is, everything is being done to Europe other than the actual shooting. All the shooting's taking place in Ukraine. So where the defence spending is concerned, it's a twofold thing, really, that he's going to have to make such a massive increase in order to do anything on a national basis. But, of course, we've got this looming European Defence and Security Union where they want to take control of capital and operational budgets. And it looks like the new German administration is going to go that way. And Starmer, under Tony Blair's direction, and Jonathan Powell will step into it. And it looks like it'll probably go that way. So people have got to differentiate between national and what will be supranational with the EU. But I've got to say, I think, this could be remedied if you wanted to rein it back. He's made the right approach by taking out foreign aid. He could bolster defence rapidly by scrapping the Chagos deal, and he could bolster defence and security even more rapidly if he abandoned net zero and put that money in right now, because that's the threat right now.
And that's the way Trump works, isn't it? It works on that basis. And I remember George Bush did when he pulled out of the Paris Accords over climate, etc. It wasn't that he didn't think we should look after the planet. It wasn't that he didn't think there was an argument to be had. It was what was needed for his people right now. And
that's right.
I don't think that's a point we should apologise for. We can obsess about the future, but sometimes we have to live in the present as well.
Yeah, it needs to be time relevant, and I spent years lobbying on defence and security in Parliament and the Lords around the referendum period and up until the Boris Johnson administration. I feel very vindicated in that now. But what you would have, Ian, is Tory MPs and ministers would run off when you wanted to talk about defence. They wouldn't stand still. So I think, for them to think that they're going to either deter, but the main thing is militarily, they've got to get back to something we did under Maggie and Reagan. A lot of people are talking about this now, is this practice of denial.
Yeah.
And it's something I've discussed at great length with Air Chief Marshal Mike Graydon on this, is how they did the denial back then at the peak of the SS-20 problem. Well, we don't just have a missile problem now with our adversaries, we have all the other stuff. It's a portfolio of things that they're going to throw at us. It's not just a missile or two, it's much, much, much more than that. And people have got to...
When you say it's more than that, in what? Just give us an idea of what you're referring to there.
Well, so I've discussed this at great length with General Sir Richard Barrons, who's now on the Defence Review, and I understand he's hitting the wall with it. But what we're talking about is that, to take a country out nowadays, okay, there's missiles and hypersonic missiles that can travel very, very quickly, but that wouldn't come on its own. You would have a massive wave of cyber and civilian disruption.
I was literally about to second guess you on that. Yeah. That's surely the new terrain for warfare, isn't it?
You're going to have all of that, and the warm-up will be they'll keep pumping out all the disinformation and the misinformation.
Yeah.
And the confusion within the general public will be exacerbated at the point then when they think they've got threshold levels and they can get away with it. In will come the kinetic stuff. But the big problem is, Ian, as you know, we've got wide open goals. What national security? This isn't just a question of, a very depleted military that is not really capable of intervening, which is why the Ukrainians are fighting this war for us, because we couldn't. It's as simple as that. Not since 2010, when Cameron did his review. That's where we've hit the wall, and we had lots of senior officers at the time. Sandy Woodward saying, we couldn't do anything other than defend the other side of the channel at that point. And things have not got better. We haven't increased capability from that point. We've actually decreased. And this money that Starmer's talking about now, if you look at Ben Wallace is saying, he's holding his hands up going, this is nowhere near enough. and we may well see continuing cuts for another year.
Listen, David, it's a very thorough call. Thank you. Really appreciated that chat. 0344 499 1000. A cracking point as well. I think that's the first time it's been raised on the programme today, that actually the future of warfare won't be tanks and people waving guns on a battlefield. It will be cyber. Imagine the horror of the entire NHS database being collapsed. It doesn't take much to think about the knock-on effects of what that would mean, both day to day, in that moment, what it would mean, but what it would mean, in the coming weeks and months before somebody found a workaround to try and fix it. It's absolutely vast, and that's the area that we, I think, need to keep our eye on. I'd like to think the head honchos in government are fully aware of that, but it's interesting how it doesn't, when we're talking about GDP of defence spending, when we're talking about Trump and Ukraine. I know there's a very physical, practical, on-the-ground component to all of this, which has to be dealt with in that way. This is physical warfare. Going forward, in terms of spending, surely that is where we need to be laying out our metaphoric tanks on the lawn in the world of cyber. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in a moment as well about the whole energy cost thing and your bill going up. Ed Miliband said it's because, fossil fuels, mate. That's what's made your bills go up. This is the bloke that told us they were going to go down, but they're going up again. Details on the way, just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is exciting. Premier League action comes to Talk this week. 2 exclusive football commentaries on Talk. Yes, we know TalkSport do what they do, but here on Talk, we are covering 2 big uns. Tonight from 7, Wolves take on Fulham, and on Wednesday, title contenders Liverpool face Newcastle. Both fixtures will be live and exclusive here on Talk. For those going, so what about Kevin O'Sullivan then? Kevin O'Sullivan is the sort of heroine of the schedule. And when I say heroine, I mean the drug rather than the hero. You need your fix of Kev's political asylum. Otherwise, life is hardly worth it, frankly, in terms of contemporary thinking and feeling sufficiently dosed up with your incredulity and your anger and your absolute perplexed nature at the way you look at the world. Kev is still here on Talk's YouTube channel tonight from 7, or on your smart TV. Kevin O'Sullivan is going nowhere. He's still here. So I think that's going to be an amazing night if you're a football fan and you want to be listening to what's happening with Wolves and Fulham, which ironically is Kev's team, by the way, Fulham. But you want to catch Kev, he's there on YouTube tonight from 7. So don't worry, turn on your radio and go, what's happened to O'Sullivan? Where's he gone? He's there, YouTube, 7 o'clock tonight. Don't be missing it. And if you're a massive football fan, don't be missing that coverage either. Let's move to this story. Ed Miliband blaming rising gas prices for higher energy bills in Britain. Bills are set to rise by 111 quid to £1,849 annually from April, marking the third consecutive increase. The Energy Secretary, who promised he would get bills down in the run-up to the election last year, is urging support for net zero initiatives to help reduce costs. If anyone in government had the biggest selling issue on the planet, I reckon it's him. Let's speak with our friend Ben Pyle, writer and co-founder of Climate Debate UK. Afternoon to you, Ben. There I was, stupidly thinking that Ed Miliband was going to put my bills down. They've gone up, and they've kept going up, and they continue to go up. And apparently it's down to fossil fuel use. So I don't know what to believe with this man. You might have muted yourself, Ben, at that point. I think we can try and get... Is that a mute issue? I think we can get Ben Pyle back with us, who always has a rather animated way of imparting the issues of the day. I think Ben's lost his audio. We are going to return to that in a couple of moments. Let me just bring you some more comment from you. This one comes in from LC, who says, how do you feel about the government's latest initiative that will allow male police officers to identify as women, being allowed to strip search women suspects in police custody? To me, this is nothing less than state-sanctioned sexual abuse. Please discuss this important topic. It absolutely is important. There's a couple of reasons why, I said this to Julia earlier, why I feel quite strongly about this. I don't know how many trans officers there are in the serving British police force. I know every now and again I see an officer who talks about these issues who is trans and, you know, debates around it, and that's, you know, some people identify as a member of the sex or the gender they were not born with. Nobody wants to harm anybody. No one wants to, you know, give it and bully anyone, give it a hard time. That should all be a gift. Shouldn't have to say any of this stuff. But reality checks are also required in all of this. And I think when we're in the territory of saying you can just identify, you are a woman because you say you are a woman. And I know that's not the case for many people who've gone through years of turmoil and all that goes with it. Again, shouldn't have to say it, but sometimes you have to. Otherwise, you are written off as a transphobic Nazi just for, you know, stating some truth. So I'll say all of that at the outset. The answer is, firstly, I doubt whether there's more than, you know, a few cops who identify as the opposite gender from their birth gender. So quite why anyone needs a massive policy is curious in itself. I don't know if this specific scenario has come up, but if it has come up, then there's only one answer to it, and that is no, you cannot strip search a female if you are a male. It's as simple as that. And whatever you might want to wear on your day off, and however much lippy you want to put it, Jermaine Greer talks about this brilliantly. All of that stuff is not gender. That's not being female. That's just highlighting and exploring femininity, if you want to look at it that way. It won't make you a woman, and it certainly doesn't put you in a place at this stage in our evolution, at least doesn't put you in a place to go, yes, I'm in a position where I could, you know, search a female. No more than you should be carrying out intrusive or very personal medical examinations on a woman if you are a bloke. I mean, unless you happen to be the gynecologist, and of course, even there, gynecological procedures, I think I'm right in saying, have to happen with a female in the room as well. But I don't think we should really have to scratch our head on this. What we do scratch our head on is how somebody in the police has decided that, yes, you should allow male officers who identify as a woman to strip search a woman. I don't know how anybody reached that conclusion without thinking, isn't this a little bit iffy? At best a little bit iffy. At worst, downright criminal and ridiculous, of course. Robert's in Nottingham. We will get Ben Pyle back. Robert, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon. Yeah, I'm good as gold, thank you. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that tricky issue of defence and energy?
Well, just a quick talk on whether we're prepared to pay more tax.
Yeah.
I think this is against the background of a lot of people, all of us, having to put up with increased bills on pretty well everything. Electricity, gas, water, council tax. Where do we finish? So I think that, the simple point I'm trying to make is there's, I guess, millions of people in this country, and I'm not talking about pensioners here, who are really struggling now. And if we say we're going to put your taxes up to increase defence spending, if we've got to do it, we've got to do it. I have my own views on that, but I'm just saying.
But we can't, because we can't kind of have it both ways, can we? There's a lot of animated voices going, "Yeah, put the defence spending up." I mean, I guess that the suggestion there is that there's loads of other areas that we waste and shouldn't be putting money into. That would cover the defence spending, so you wouldn't have to put taxes up.
That is true. I mean, the point you made earlier about, what is it called, the latte factor.
Yes.
There is all that sort of thing. But I mean, I'm sort of reasonably well off. I'm not poor, I'm not rich, but I'm just saying there's, millions of people in this country who are really struggling at the moment.
100%.
Financially. Young people with children, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And having to ask them to pay even more tax for whatever reason is a big ask, I think. And I don't know what any government's going to do about that.
Yeah. It's a very good point. And I don't need to make a very grim analysis even grimmer, if that's possible, Robert. It's probably going to get worse.
Yeah, I'm an optimist, but I'm afraid it probably is.
Yeah, indeed.
It's not an easy one, and any government that's in power at the moment, because there are different views on what we should spend on defence spending for all sorts of reasons. So it is what it is.
Spot on. Listen, Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. Robert in Nottingham. Cracking one in from Tony Addison on Twitter, who I was talking about. If you go online, you can see your own HMRC summary, and I don't know if it's just for. I suppose it's self-employed. Is it just self-employed or can anybody? I don't know. I assume that because self-employed, obviously you pay through a different corridor. You have to pay your fees, and there's a way of seeing the breakdown of how your money is spent. I didn't see mine as a percentage. I saw mine in actual monetary terms, but maybe that you can click on either or to see both. But Tony says, my HMRC summary says 5% of my taxes already goes on defence, and there it is there. Similarly to mine, welfare is top of the list, so 21.6% of Tony's tax goes to welfare, and that doesn't include state pension, because that's 11.4%. Health, 20.2%, national debt interest 11%, education 10.2%, and defence 5.2%. And I reckon if I looked at mine, it'd probably be the same figure, right? Thereabouts. So if we're all spending 5.2% on defence, or do they have a wider definition of defence? Defence not being solely military based. Other forms of defence. I don't know. I have no idea why it would say 5.2% if we're only paying 2.5% or 2.3% at the moment. Strange times, huh? 0344 499 1000. We're hoping to get Ben Pyle back with us to talk more about Ed Miliband blaming rising gas prices for higher energy bills. He's blaming the fossil fuels. Is Ed correct on this one, or do you have a counter view? 0344 499 1000.
confident are you that Donald Trump, in talks with Putin and Zelensky, separately it would appear so far, could bring about peace in Ukraine within weeks, as Donald Trump claims? And what would that peace look like?
Now, the important thing, really important thing, is that President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are brought into these discussions. What would be an absolute disaster, very reminiscent of when Czechoslovakia was sold down the road in 1938, if a deal was done over the head of Ukraine, over the head of Zelensky.
Get your tissues, everyone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Would you believe it? Ben Parr's going to be back with us in just a moment. By the way, we've got a brand new Voice of Doom for those who are uninitiated with radio's greatest mystery voice feature. It is right here, the Voice of Doom. It's like a mystery voice, but with always a political kind of angle to it. That means it might be a politician, past or present. Could be something connected to the world of politics/news. If that makes sense. Yesterday, it's brand new. Yesterday was Monica Lewinsky went on for 5 days. Sorry, I don't know how else I can phrase that. 5 days, but it was one yesterday. We've got a brand new one today. Here it is.
Now, in the present situation...
I think that's doable. You might have to be a bit of a political anorak, but I think it's doable. Here it is again.
Now, in the present situation...
Don't call in, there is no prize. You can message in if you fancy having a crack at that, OK? We will tell you on the other side of the news who it is if we get a right answer in the next 10 to 15 minutes. If we don't, it rolls over to tomorrow. Here's the voice again.
Now, in the present situation...
Who's that? 87222. So let's go back to Ed Miliband and the shenanigans over there at Miliband HQ. He's blaming rising gas prices for higher energy bills. It's your fossil fuels. Listen to Ed, he'll make it cheaper, he said. Ben Pyle, writer and co-founder of Climate Debate UK, is finally back with us. I think Ed Miliband's boys went up a pylon and cut the wires somehow there, Ben.
Yeah, I think maybe the telephones are wind-powered or solar-powered.
It could well be that. What are you making of Miliband's assessment, then? The reason we got higher bills is because of fossil fuels.
Well, I think Ed is telling another fib, and we can know this because he knew everything that everyone else knew before he came to power. And we were saying, and lots of people were saying, energy prices are going to rise. So, I mean, he's right to the extent that gas prices at regional markets, that is the price we pay on wholesale markets for gas, has risen quite dramatically. Up until the middle of this month, there had been a doubling of wholesale gas prices, which sounds like a lot, and indeed it probably is. But if you think about it in terms of electricity price, you pay 25 pence per kilowatt hour for electricity, whereas the gas the gas power station turned into electricity, that cost 8p. So yes, the price of electricity has gone up from about 21p to about 25p over the last year. That's not a huge amount in the historical sense. You also, on top of that 25 pence, pay about 65 pence per day standing charge, which is the Ofgem's sort of sneaky way of passing more costs onto you without sort of seeming to increase prices. So Ed Miliband knew all this, and he knew that the price of gas is only a fraction of the total price that consumers pay. Yet he continues to still tell these fibs. The other great big lie about this is the fact that Ed Miliband is doing everything he can, and it was one of his election promises, to restrict North Sea gas production. He said no new licenses for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. And this is like, it's no mystery. If you restrict the supply of gas, guess what? The price of that thing, or not just gas, anything. If you restrict the supply and the production of something, then the price rises, right? So Miliband has been working for 20 years or longer, perhaps, to prevent the use, the production of gas. So he's sort of making people believe, or trying to make people believe, that markets are sort of some external force that the governments have no control over, which is the opposite of the truth. And you can see how terrible that lie is when you compare the price of gas on European and British gas markets to the price of gas on American markets. We pay 4 times the price. That is to say, a kilowatt hour of gas in America costs you 1 penny. Over here, it's 4 penny, and then and the rest is arithmetic. So he's lying about the role that gas markets play in our energy prices, and he's lying about the effect that his policies are having on the gas prices. And he knows he's not telling the truth as well. Yet he came to power on the promises of lower bills. In some cases, I've seen Labour Party election campaigning literature promising voters a £1,000 reduction in their bill. And what happened instead? We got a 10% rise in October, we got a 1.2 or so % rise in January, and today we've had a 6.4% rise. So in total, the net total is an 18% rise in energy prices since the Labour Party came to power. So so this is gaslighting. He's surrounded by blobs, and all of the stuff that he puts out in his sort of hyperactive social media account says, oh, green growth, green jobs, lower bills. And this is a mantra for the government and for Ed Miliband. Yet when everyone, and they're surrounded by, Guardian articles and Guardian types and think tanks and wonks saying, oh, net zero is great for the economy. But then when everyone looks at their bills, they're going up and up and up. So Ed Miliband's trying to tell us that things are getting better. So there's this huge disparity between what he's saying and reality, and he must think we're as daft as he is if he thinks we're going to believe it.
I've got to say, Ben, you're very, very cynical, and are you not aware we're all going to die? I mean, this is the bottom line, you see. This is the bit you're missing from the wisdom of Sir Ed Miliband. We're all going to die, the planet's going to die, frogs and plants are all going to shrivel up. There'll be nothing left of us unless we all buy into a new way of living. And when we do buy into the new way of living, with the windmills and the solar panels, everything will be cheaper and life will be better. Which bit of that, Ben Pyle, can you not get your head around?
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, even if that was true, the problem is we're going to die of cold and hunger and poverty before Gaia's revenge comes to get us, right? So even if you believe all the climate alarmism, the immediate doom is going to come and get us, we'd be better off with affordable and abundant power and fuel and energy. Right, that would be a crisis that we would be better served by affordable food, affordable prices.
Yeah.
Because we can be sure of one thing: whether there are any uncertainties about climate change and global warming going into the future, we can be sure that high prices kill people. We can be sure that when older people who are often very proud can't afford to and don't want handouts. Can't afford to heat their homes, they die. They die of neglect. And all of these kind of costs are very often made invisible to the likes of Ed Miliband and green campaigners. They talk a very good game about wanting to make the world a better place and to save the planet, but ultimately they don't really care when people's businesses fold, when people's jobs are lost. All they're interested in is the size of the green economy. They're only interested in seeing how policy is inflating the bottom line for energy companies, not how that turns into effects for households.
And in terms of going forward on this, look, we've already seen a couple of examples where Ed Miliband, in fact, I'm surprised he's still in situ, really, because he's had to sit back and watch an airport be given the green light for expansion. There's some oil fields that are still going to carry on. There was another story that has escaped me at the moment that would very much go against what Team Ed would all be about. But, of course, there's nothing a man likes more than a big red case and a chauffeured car and the position of high office. So he's managed to sort of circumnavigate all of these things and say, well, don't worry, because I'm going to plant some trees in Cleethorpes and that will offset any runway expansion or oil drilling anywhere. What would it take for Ed Miliband, do you think, to resign?
I don't think. I mean, he's an incredibly arrogant and intransigent person. I've not seen him. You know, I've been watching him since he was Secretary of State for the Department of Energy and Climate Change back in 2008, 9, 10, and I've never seen him budge on any single question that's put to him by his critics. Yet everything that his critics, such as Net Zero Watch, formerly the Global Warming Policy Foundation, have put to, have all turned out to be correct. Since the Utilities Act in the year 2000, energy prices have tripled. And that's been of no concern to any of the politicians that have had the energy brief, quite frankly, from any of the parties in opposition or in coalition or in government. They have been, you know, promising jam tomorrow for the whole duration of this century. That's 25 years since we first started sort of having renewable energy mandates. And this has been to no effect. So I think we've got an enormous democratic deficit, and people on the wrong side of that democratic deficit, the likes of Ed Miliband, are essentially completely protected from democracy. It's been very difficult for there to be for these questions to go up the political agenda, and I think the epitome of that may not even be Ed himself, but his brother, David Miliband, who was the minister who was responsible for drafting the Climate Change Act in 2007 and 8. And of course, he left politics. But when he left politics, he landed himself in $1 million a year job.
Yeah, nice gig.
Nice work if you can get it. I doubt it's even work, quite frankly. I imagine it's probably even nicer than being a minister of state with the energy brief.
It's not really a job, is it, over there in New York? It's a lot of lunches, I would imagine, more than anything.
Kind of lottery-winning lifestyle. So these are the priorities that ministers, I think, really have, to be honest, is to serve themselves, to look after their careers, and to change Britain in ways that Britain has never been asked for its consent for.
Indeed. Ben, I have to step in there. We literally hit the clock, but it's been great as ever. Passionate stuff from Ben Pyle, writer. He's co-founder of Climate Debate UK. Over to you on this one as well. 0344 499 1000. And the new voice of doom. Here's the voice.
Now, in the present situation...
Who is that? We might tell you if we get a right answer on the other side of the news headlines at 3 o'clock. Next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up on 3 minutes, even after 3 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of common sense. A packed hour is on the way. We are talking about government plans to cut the aid budget in order to increase the defence budget to 2.5% by 2027. However, there are dissenters in the wings. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it's got to be 3% at least to secure European security against Russian aggression. Would you be willing to pay higher taxes in order to increase the defence budget? Over to you on that one. Also this afternoon, phone snatchers are the target of a new police crackdown, with officers now permitted to search homes without a warrant for stolen goods that are electronically tagged. Obviously, your mobile phone can be tagged and traced. It could be a bike that's got a tag attached to it, or anything else for that matter. Now they won't need a warrant. They'll just potentially take your front door off if you're a thief. And UK newspapers, together with musicians, authors and other creatives, have launched a campaign opposing government proposals that could allow AI firms to train models on copyrighted material without compensation. This could be a really grim time, not just for musicians, but for anyone whose work or voice or music is used in any shape or form. Details on the way. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. We did the Voice of Doom just before the news. It was day one of a brand new voice. Let's have a listen to the one we played you.
Now, in the present situation...
Who is that? Now, I'm always intrigued by some of the wrong answers, because some of them you go, do you know what, that is the wrong answer, but I understand why you said it. For example, Jacob Rees-Mogg. A lot of you guessed Jacob Rees-Mogg. Wait, can we hear it again, Amy?
Now, in the present situation...
I kind of get why somebody would say that, but it's not Jacob Rees-Mogg. Malcolm Rifkind, former Foreign Secretary, who was with us on this programme just a couple of hours ago. It's not him, nor is it Ted Heath. He was far deeper. It's not Nigel Farage. I don't think that sounds anything like Nigel Farage. It's not Nigel Farage. Robin Day, former host of Question Time, of course, back in the day. It's not him. Michael Heseltine, no. Cecil Parkinson, oh, naughty Cecil. Not him. Nor is it William Hague. In fact, we have not got a right answer. Here's the voice again.
Now, in the present situation...
Tomorrow, around about 2:45, it returns for day 2 of the Voice of Doom. Now on to this one at 3:05. Phone snatchers are being targeted in a new police crackdown. Officers will be allowed to search homes without a warrant for any stolen goods that have been electronically tagged. As I was saying a second ago, could be your phone, could be a bike, could be a laptop, whatever it happens to be. Here's Home Secretary Yvette Cooper laying out what's in the new crime and policing bill. Have a listen.
And no one is above the law, no matter who they are. And that's why we are taking action with this new legislation that we're putting forward today, which will focus on tackling town centre crime, giving the police and communities the power to take back our town centres with action on shoplifting, on mobile phone theft, on antisocial behaviour in our town centres, but also measures that target the most serious violence of all, including violence and sexual abuse of children, also violence against women and girls, stalking and spiking measures, and knife crime, making it much harder for children to get these lethal weapons.
Well, close off their kitchen in their own house would be the only way you could guarantee that, and even that wouldn't probably stop it. But nonetheless, that's some of what this new bill is going to be about. There's more in it. As I mentioned, one of the big headlines, the ability for the old bill to get into a house without a warrant if they think there's something in there that's electronically tagged. Let's speak with David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange, where Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, was there a little earlier as well, making comments on the issues of the day. David, good to have you with us. Lots in this bill, but the one that's got all the headlines, of course, is this business of mobile phones. Your ability to finally say to the police, it's in number 53. Instead of getting the answer, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it, apparently now there will be something they can do about it. Is that broadly what the story is here?
Good afternoon, Ian. Well, yeah, that's broadly right. And, you know, this is a big crime and policing bill that the government's put forward. There's a lot of measures here. You know, some of them are quite technical and technocratic, but, you know, it is good to see the government taking steps to, you know, deal with some of these issues that certainly policing and I think the public have been crying out for a while. And certainly this one that you're talking about here, where electronic goods, so mobile phones, tagged bikes, those sorts of things, and they show up on your phone or your computer as being inside that flat over there. And for the police to say, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about that, just seems very, very confusing for the public and victims of crime. And they rightly say, well, what on earth's going on? Like, we know it's over there in number 53. I can see it on my computer right here. So the fact that this is something that the government these powers are going to be given to the police seems to me an entirely logical step forward by the government.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I've lost count, David, on how many. Every time we talk about things like, you know, a bike or a mobile phone, these are classic areas where there appears to be very little police response. It's not the fault of the average copper on the street that something has shifted in terms of priorities. And everyone will tell the same story. Look, you know, I know the person that even stole the bike, or I know roughly who it is. Certainly was able to track it to that road. I'm pretty much in the ballpark. I think it's the house over there. Let's not blame everybody at number 53, David, by the way, because I'm sure at 54 there's a few dodgy characters in there as well. So maybe it was them. And nothing seems to happen. Now, of course, it's all very well having the new legislation in place, but we still need action.
You're right. And we see this time and again in other areas where, you know, it may be that the legislation and the regulations are already there and we don't necessarily see enough action from the police. So you're absolutely right. The next step will be making sure that the police take action. But you know, I feel like we shouldn't just lump all of the responsibility and the blame on the police here. One of the things that we need to see is, and we've seen recently, is our prisons are full. And the reality is, what we need to see is, yes, the police going in, catching these burglars and these robbers, and then we need to see the courts doing the right thing and sending these people to prison. At the moment, the reality is the prisons are full, and what we need to see is more prisons being built, more prison places, so that particularly the most prolific offenders, and when we looked into this about 18 months ago, we did some research on this, we were finding people that had 100, 150 previous convictions for crimes not being sent to prison when they're convicted again. So that is absolutely needs to be a priority. The Home Office has done their bit. We now need to see the Treasury and the Ministry of Justice making the money available to get more people sent to prison when they're committing so many offences.
Yeah, and I'm trying to make a similar point as well many times. I mean, I get that there are some people that probably shouldn't be in prison, and prison is the wrong place or the wrong form of punishment for some offenders. But I'm sort of tired of hearing people say, well, prison doesn't work, we need more non-custodial options. Well, if you've got 150 convictions, the chances are you've been through every type of non-custodial sentence, from community service to goodness knows what else. And clearly that doesn't work either. There are times when you need a prison.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And, you know, the reality is the function of the purpose of prison, there are numerous purposes. One is to punish people that have broken the rules. And I tell you what, prison does work for that. And the other thing is it's to give the public a break from those people who are persistent in their offending. And it works for that as well. So, you know, I recognise that there is a lot more to be done around rehabilitation in prisons. And you know, the Chief Inspector of Prisons reports on that very, very regularly. And the Ministry of Justice needs to get on with it and sorting that side of things out. But there are ways that prison does work, and giving the victims and public a break from some of these offenders is one of the ways where it's important.
Indeed. David, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. Thank you to him. I find it extraordinary, and I'm going to mention the electronic tag and curfew thing again. When we first started talking about this, and basically we know what an electronic tag is, and my contention, which I think is probably reflects the views of most reasonably sane people, is why are we not utilising tagging more? So a good example would be if you're a 16-year-old and you're caught carrying a small knife, not using, we're told, well, there's not enough prison places. Well, surely, automatically, if nothing else, you'd stick a tag around the ankle and you'd be on a curfew for a year. You can't go out after 5 p.m. And if you do, then you go to clink. It's like a no-brainer, right? It's like somebody telling you that, you know, the sky is blue. Yeah, we know that. It's so obvious. And I would have thought an awful lot cheaper in terms of comparisons to a custodial sentence. Sometimes the argument comes back, well, actually, a lot of the tags aren't that reliable. They're not, and they can be taken off. Man, it's the 21st century. Are you really telling me no one's gone into Dragon's Den with the Acme new all singing, all dancing electronic tag? Can't be taken off, never goes off. The battery lasts forever. It can't be tinkered with. It's impossible to... You'd have it, Peter Jones will be throwing money at you. Deborah Meaden would be in before you got the first sentence out. Surely, by now, that would be an obvious answer. So there's that. And also, I'm bound to ask, and I'll talk to Andy on crime in just a second, have you been the person on the receiving end of a theft that involved an electronic device or electronically tagged device, like your bike, which had a tag attached to it, quite obvious that the tag could be spotted, you knew roughly where it was, or your phone was nicked, you were able to find out roughly what area it was in, or even specifically where it was, because by the time you got into the vicinity, you could then track it, and it bleeped away, and it bleeped and said, yeah, 2 feet, 3 feet, yards, meters, whatever, and you knew it. And then you ring the police and go, it's in that house over there, because look, it's pinging like Billy-O on my laptop. Nothing happened. But it's in there, the criminal. You've literally got a thief in behind that door, officer, is a thief. Someone's half-inched me mobile. Me Nokia's gone for good, unless you can get it back inside that door. If you've been on the receiving end of what feels like a chronic injustice, and I'll say this again, in defence of the act, there's no cop sitting around the corner going, nah, I can't be bothered with that, I'll just go and get a McDonald's. That ain't happening. This goes way above the pay grade of the average Bobby on the beat. Other decisions about priorities that have gone, nobody can work out what they are or where they came from, but something about common sense has disappeared. The police are working ridiculously hard. They're up against it with few resources. So bear all that in mind. However, that's no consolation if you're the person who knows your mobile, your bike, your laptop is behind that flipping door and nobody is going to help you. If you've been there, 0344 499 1000. Let's go to your calls. Andy in Hampshire on the issue of crime. What are your thoughts, Andy? Good afternoon to you.
I'm waiting for a disaster to happen. You're telling me that they're gonna allow police to enter property without a warrant. Now, believe me, I don't have a problem with police collecting people's goods if it's been nicked.
Yep.
But my problem is what if somebody stitches somebody up with an AirPod tag? The police go ramming in there without a warrant, can't find nothing. Who's accountable? This is my problem.
So if they get the wrong house, because the little bleeping machine went off roughly between numbers 7 and 8 in the street, if they get the wrong one, there could be a lawsuit.
Of course there will be.
Well, what if they don't knock the door down, though, Andy? They just knock on the door.
Have you seen how the police operate? They don't knock anywhere, do they?
Well, they generally, I think they probably knock more than they knock doors down, surely.
To be honest...
They've got the ability, new powers will allow them to search homes without a warrant. It doesn't mean that they're going to, smash every door down and have 17 cops in vans waiting to pick up your Nokia.
Yeah, I just have this problem with no warrant. I don't have a problem with the police, how they do their...
It's a good point, actually. In terms of a civilised world, a democratically functioning world, a warrant should be required, yeah?
Yes, why not? If they know where the phone is and the tag is corresponding to that phone, then why can't they do what they always do? Go to a magistrate, get a warrant, and then enter the premises. At least they're covering themselves then. But by not having a warrant and going in to a house, they go, well, they might knock on your door quite civilised, but I don't think once the door's open they're going to be civilised, because as we've seen with Granny, who face tweeted something that was very offensive to an MP. I mean, they went steaming in there, and she was a little old lady. I mean,
I hear what you're saying. It happened to a friend of mine, to be honest, Andy. Somebody I used to work with, his door, I think it was a Saturday evening, the door went in, a load of cops came, put handcuffs on him and his wife. The kids are screaming, what the hell's going on? Half an hour after they'd gone running into every single room and, you know, having a look in drawers and trying to establish where the booty was. I can't remember what the alleged offence was. They realised they had got the right house number, they just got the wrong road. So it can happen, and it does lead, you know, my mate said at the time, you know, we've always brought the kids up to say, look, if you're in trouble, you call the police. And their first interaction with the old Bill was that. So it's not, I mean, they are rare occasions, but you take the point. Andy, thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Don in Chelmsford says, can we look forward to Terminator-style AI police units? Imagine them kicking down a door to search a house for a stolen phone. If they can't find it, they would say, I'll be back. I'll be back, yeah. Well, they might do, Don. They might do. But you'd think by now, well, I guess the problem with mobile phone theft is there's so much of it. And it's gone, and probably in most cases, whilst you might have a good clue where your laptop is, I think in most cases you probably discover that it's been on a slow boat to China by about 6 o'clock in the evening, packaged off with 1,000 others. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
How confident are you that Donald Trump, in talks with Putin and Zelensky, separately it would appear so far, could bring about peace in Ukraine within weeks, as Donald Trump claims? And what would that peace look like?
Now, the important thing, really important thing, is that President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are brought into these discussions. What would be an absolute disaster, very reminiscent of when Czechoslovakia was sold down the road in 1938, if a deal was done over the head of Ukraine, over the head of Zelensky.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes in from Michelle, who says they're scrapping warrants to take more of our civil liberties away. This is like Nazi Germany. Well, there is an interesting point about the warrant, because whilst we all sympathise with the mobile phone or the laptop that's gone missing, and if it happens to you, you go to the police, you just kick the door down, it's in there. And naturally, that's the action you want to happen, because you know your phone is in the house or your bike or whatever it happens to be. But actually, if we want to live in a civilised system where, you know, we don't function in that kind of way, then getting a warrant is a point where the state is kind of double-checked by a magistrate who will look at something and go, OK, we don't just willy-nilly knock doors down. They do that in Putin's Russia, they do that in China, North Korea, but we don't do that here. So I need to see some more details before you're allowed to do it. And it might be sometimes laborious, and it might be time-consuming, and there might be a point when you think the crime will be gone by the time you've got a flipping warrant, and I know the phone or the laptop is inside that house. I think the necessity to retain democratic process is greater than that. In fact, that might not be the... Of course, if you've got some scumbag who's nicked your kit and they're inside that house and you know they are there, then great. If the police believe a crime has been committed and they have that amount of evidence, they will have reason to get into a house and detain somebody. So it's a more nuanced and convoluted setup in its entirety. However, I think retaining the notion of a warrant is quite critical, actually. Matt's in Peterborough. On defence, Matt, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
What I was ringing for is, I don't think many people realise this, but we've got 65,000 dossed up civil servants, MOD civil servants working for the Ministry of Defence, and we've only got 75,000 soldiers. So when people are talking about, we need to spend 3% on defence, I think what we really need to do is to spend the money better, because the way that the Ministry of Defence spends money is absolutely crazy. That's what I was ringing.
How many civil servants did you say?
They reckon, if you Google it, they reckon 65,000. The MOD's got 65,000 civil servants, Whitehall civil servants, right? And so they've only got 75,000 soldiers, so they've nearly got one civil servant for every soldier. It's as bad as that.
I mean, that is, when you put it like that, that's extraordinary, right? I mean,
it's like the thing as well. They reckon that rear admirals in the Navy. Well, we've got something like, I think there's 31 or something rear admirals, and then actual combat ships, we've got something like 20, 21.
So we've got more admirals than ships. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's absolutely crazy. The Royal Navy aircraft carriers.
Yes.
They had a system on there where it was called Crow's Nest. And what it is, it looks like Dusty Bin. You remember Dusty Bin?
Yeah.
The game show. It looks like a dustbin underneath a helicopter. That's what it is. And the idea is that the helicopter takes off and then they can see over the horizon to see if there's any enemy threats and all this sort of thing. Now, foreign navies don't do that. Foreign navies have a proper aircraft, like an AWACS aircraft. That takes off from the carrier, because obviously if you've got a helicopter, it doesn't fly high enough, so it's a waste of time. And the Royal Navy's add that as a sort of bodge-up, cheap way of doing it. I think the system's been in use 4 years. They've been training on it for 2 years, and now they've decided to scrap it. So £425 million they've spent on that.
On the bin.
And it's just a complete waste of time.
On Dusty Bin.
On Dusty Bin, yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's just the way they spend the money. You need to get somebody in there who goes, right, what are we buying? I always think as well that they reckon, don't they, that BAE Systems can sort of walk in to the Prime Minister's, to number 10 at any time. They can open. They've got the key. It's like the defence procurement. We should be buying stuff from other countries. We should be buying stuff off the shelf, which you could get at half the price. That's what should be going on.
Yeah. It's all messed up out there, isn't it? It's completely messed up. Matt, thank you very much indeed for that. Matt in Peterborough on defence, and nice to invoke the memory of Dusty Bin, who I've met, by the way, the actual Dusty Bin, but that's a whole other story. Let's not go there. Otherwise, we get into retro TV. And who wants to do that? Leslie in County Durham. Leslie, what are your thoughts? Hi.
I have a dusty bin.
Do you have a dusty... I mean, literally a dusty bin or just a dusty bin? Got it.
Well, I'm calling about defence.
Yes.
And I actually would like to know what % of foreign aid has been cut to make this go up to 2.5% in 2027. Why not now?
Why not now? Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well... I think that we should cut all foreign aid apart from disasters.
Yep.
And then cut all illegal aid. Cut all legal aid to the illegal people coming over into our country. So that should stop. If they know that they can't get that when they get here,
You would think, wouldn't you, that there would be, without putting up taxes, there'd be quite a lot of ways you could save some money.
Yeah, and then, there's trade-offs, and then there's net zero, and there's all these, even with the Ukraine issue, why commit for that length of time and that amount of money? So there's lots more cuts that can be done here. We shouldn't need to be, the people shouldn't be paying any more tax for defence because it can be found already in all these other budgets.
And if it, I mean, they might say, in response to that, Leslie, the government might say, actually, there's not enough money in all of those other places. I don't believe that, by the way, but that would be the answer, isn't it?
Well, that's why we need a real chancellor, who can actually do the job and move the figures around to make things work.
Well, whether you like Elon Musk or not, but you can imagine he'd be having a field day with this, wouldn't he?
I would love him to be cloned and him to be coming over here and just really rattling the cage.
A clone of Elon. They could sell Elon Musk's.
Yeah. And just to rattle Rachel Reeves, because I don't believe that this money cannot be found. And talking about all this money, the winter fuel cut, it just puts into why? Why with all this money? But we need an Elon Musk here, and basically just to work out make a lot of cuts for unnecessary expenditure, and that we can pile into our defence, because I do believe that we're going to be in trouble, and we won't have enough.
I get it. Leslie, thank you very much indeed for that. Leslie in County Durham. Thank you for that. Some really great points in what she said there as well. Let's get a voice note on the issue of crime. This comes from Phil.
The problem with this new "we don't need a warrant" situation is it's open for abuse. Just like the human rights law, it's open for abuse. They say with mobile phones, but they'll be bashing the doors down, stomping in for any old reason.
There it is, and that's a genuine concern. I'm sure, I'm going to guess here that there will be a kind of ready-made answer from the police or certainly from the Home Office as to why that won't be the case. And I think this was designed to make it look like Labour are on top of something that appears in an isolated level to be a small crime. I've had my phone nicked. OK, it's not exactly murder or assault, but, we'll do our best. But collectively, a massive organised crime, behind some of these things. It's designed to do that, but as Phil said, and others who've got in touch, there's a potential for there's abuse on that. Be careful what you wish for in this respect. Gary says, reference Ed Miliband. So Ed Miliband claims that fossil fuels have become horrendously expensive compared to green electricity, does he? Well, here's the thing, Ian. When Labour got kicked out of office in 2010, the price of a barrel of Brent crude was $74 a barrel. The price of a barrel of Brent crude today is, wait for it, $74 a barrel. So after adjusting for inflation, oil, a fossil fuel, has actually got a lot cheaper in the last 15 years. I love the number crunching, Gary. I wonder what the official answer is to that, as to why would oil companies say, not go, hang on a second, don't blame us, it's got cheap. Well, they wouldn't, because they're still charging more. But Ed Miliband should be pointing that out. Ed Miliband should be going, hang on, oil companies are charging more, but actually it's got cheaper. That's what he should be saying, but of course he can't go anywhere near an endorsement of oil, can he? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Rich in Leicester, who says, I've had dealings with electronic tagging for over 20 years. It's very hard to explain why it is a complete nightmare, but it is. Poorly run contracts, the legislation behind it, and difficulties dealing with breach are probably the main issues. But in reality, it's not as simple as it should be in theory, says Rich in Leicester. And you know, I have no trouble imagining that to be exactly the case. It's one of those classic things when some, you know, gob on a stick like me or anyone else in a pub just goes, well, I just tag them. What could go wrong? I am aware loads has gone wrong in the past. I'm vaguely aware of some of what Rich has correctly highlighted there. But I'm going to counter that by going, hang on, it's the 21st century. Has nobody invented something that can kind of usurp or circumnavigate whatever the previous problems were? And certainly breaching is one, and the contracts of who deals with it when the tag goes off. I imagine that's probably a fairly controversial point. Surely by now, the amount of money they put into all sorts of areas of life, you'd think they can't work this out. Hang on, it's a tag on someone's ankle. If it bleeps, it means they breached the order of their tag, curfew related. It's now 6 o'clock. They weren't meant to be out after 5, so we go and arrest them. Have we got a copper of it? No, we haven't. Right, so there you go. Straight away, there's a problem. I can see the problems, but you'd like to think that by now somebody somewhere would have come up with a suggestion to combat the problems. Let's move to this area. Here's another problem, talking of technology. UK creatives like musicians, newspapers and authors have launched a Make It Fair campaign urging the government to protect copyright laws from AI exploitation. So we've got artists in this like Kate Bush, Annie Lennox, Damon Albarn have released a silent album. Is that what we want? To highlight the impact of AI on the creative industries. It's a 47-minute album featuring sparse background sounds symbolising a world without musicians. I like what they've done. Will it be enough to change any laws? Rob Lyons is Science and Tech Director at the Academy of Ideas. Afternoon to you, Rob.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, this was one of those areas where we were told a few years ago, you know, be careful because this whole AI thing could get out of control. Is this an example of where this thing is doing exactly that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we want to have artists, we want to have musicians or painters or playwrights, then we have to find a way to pay them. And unless we're going to have state-sponsored payments of things, we pay them per play by giving them a copyright and paying them royalties. And if these AI systems come along and can basically train themselves on their music or on their art and then, you know, just sort of spew out kind of generic versions of something similar, then those artists will lose out, and eventually we'll just not have artists, so we'll only have artists who are got an independent income, that mummy and daddy are, got loads of money, can afford little Johnny or Holly's hobby of making music. That's the way it's going to work, and it's not going to be a very interesting or diverse artistic scene.
Yeah, I think it was Paul McCartney recently that said there is a track that's had multiple downloads, hundreds of thousands probably, Paul McCartney singing. It was a classic song, very classic song, but it wasn't Paul McCartney singing it. It was, a voice that sounded like Paul McCartney. And of course, that's not okay, is it really? If you're Paul McCartney, I mean, he doesn't need the money. But that's not all right for somebody to go, here it is, and look, you've got 2 million downloads of this song, but it's not him. Is it that is the problem, or is the problem that somebody will just kind of crunch the AI, the algorithm will look at a song and make a sort of sound-alike type song, or is it all of the above?
Well, I mean, if you want to do like a kind of, you want Sir Paul McCartney to sing your wife happy birthday and you can generate that through AI, well, that's a bit of fun, that's fine. I don't think Paul McCartney's going to lose any sleep over that. If people start using this stuff commercially, I think that is a really big problem because it just undermines the whole environment in which people, artists, make a living. I mean, my wife is an artist, Louise Turnbull, and she found some information which suggests that the median visual artist now makes 12 grand a year. That's less than the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right. So it's bad enough as it stands. But if people then and these AI companies are ripping your stuff off for free, then it's an even bigger problem, and it's something that needs to be done about it.
Yeah, and this can happen in all sorts of ways. So, you know, it's not just musicians, newspapers, authors, you know, write a book in the style of J.K. Rowling, you know, that kind of thing. And before you know it, you've got, like, you know, what could be quite a compelling novel. It says that it wasn't written by J.K. Rowling. In fact, the AI thing doesn't even need to say, you know, this is a book by J.K. Rowling. It could say it's a book by Bob Smith, but it will be successful because it's written in the style of J.K. Rowling. Similarly with newspaper columnists, I know Paul Gambaccini was talking about this, as you probably saw, Rob, because his voice was used, or it wasn't his voice, to narrate a really bad YouTube movie of some sort, a kids' film or something. So it's literally got several tentacles, this AI nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst thing is that what will happen is that the AI will start training on itself, because this stuff will start to become more and more ubiquitous, this kind of fake content, and then it will start training on itself, and it will get worse and worse. So we'll end up without good art at all. You know, never mind good artists, but not even good art, because this, you know, generic crap will just, you know, feed itself. So we do need to start somehow. But from the financial point of view, give artists protection of their copyrights so that they continue to earn a living. And from an artistic or just from the good of society point of view, we have to stop this thing spreading too much, because, you know, we'll end up with just very, very poor art in place of the kind of high quality, you know, genius that we can select and enjoy, that's being produced so often in the past.
But if I were to, you know, if I had a sort of little AI empire, Rob, and I knew how to press the right buttons and the faders, and I took a sort of sample of Kate Bush and I put her voice in there, and I wanted something that was a little bit sort of Army Dreamer-esque kind of styly, and out it came. It belched out a song, and I released that song. If I released it saying I was Kate Bush, then I would be breaking the law as it stands now anyway, wouldn't I? That would be a breach of existing copyright. So, but it doesn't mean it couldn't still be out there on the internet in a kind of moody manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if somebody's posted that on YouTube, they'll be earning the ad revenue from that, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it is one of the latest versions of how technology keeps sort of like scrambling the artistic ecosystem, as it were. You know, like artists now don't really make much money from the actual music anyway. They have to go out and do massive world tours to earn the big bucks in a way that perhaps artists in the past didn't have to do. So that's all because of streaming, where they get very little money for each play. So, you know, it's a challenge, and I don't want to stop AI. I think AI could be very, very useful in lots and lots of ways, but we have to do it in a way that's going to protect that, not just for artists, but for everyone.
Yeah, indeed. Rob, thank you. Really appreciate your time. Rob Lyons, Science and Tech Director at the Academy of Ideas. I mean, there are genuine, disturbing questions. Not a few, like loads. We're just talking about the creative world here. I mean, the applications could be all over the place in terms of impersonation and knowing right from wrong. Who wrote a certain article? Was that column written by... Look, here's a column I read regularly I read Julia Hartley-Brewer's column in The Sun, for example. Well, here's another one here that looks and sounds like Julia Hartley-Brewer's writing and words, so I can just read that as well. So I'm ripping off the style of somebody. If you did that in the real world, then you'd be in a courtroom. If it's under the anonymity of AI, then you're not, right? I mean, you're in a completely different world. We never had this world before. This is probably going to dominate news headlines for a good few years in so many different areas. Of course, the flip side of all of this is that AI used in medicine and surgical procedures and areas such as that, crime detection, could be a great thing. So that's the downside. But this will make a very confused place to live. John is in Cornwall. Back to that question of defence. John, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit strange, really, because I've seen that Keir Starmer is saying that he will do 2.5% of GDP by 2027.
Yeah.
Does he think the world is going to stop turning for 2 years?
Yes. Because, not now, in 2 years' time, right? What's the deal there?
And on the top of that, I think Donald Trump will just pure and simply have to meet with Macron, demand that the members of NATO divvy up to 5% of GDP. I mean, Poland they're way ahead of us already.
They are indeed, but you could argue there are very specific reasons why. I don't know what Poland's defence spending was prior to the invasion of Ukraine. My guess is that it wouldn't have been quite as much as it is now. I don't know, but so there might be very specific geographic reasons for that. The next question, though, John, is how do we fund it?
Well, that's a big question. I keep raising on many different subjects. You can only spend £1 once. Where do they expect the British public, and remember Starmer and his government cancelled winter fuel allowance, where do they think people are going to get this money from?
Yep.
It's not magic money. I mean, fairy stories are only fairy stories. It isn't real. And I think that where he's talking about 2030, for it to be at 3%, they won't be in office by that time.
Well, and that's an aspiration. That's not even a full promise. So, there's a lot dependent on that. But getting people to pay more tax. I mean, we live in a very high rate tax economy. So I know there are people on the left who will go, what are you talking about? It should be 80% if you're a rich old duffer. You'll get nonsense like that. But broadly speaking, we pay our dues in a very significant way in this country. It's often very hard to see what we get back. So to ask people to pay more, John, would be, a big ask right now.
Well, it is, and it always reminds you of a famous film from the 80s where called Escape from New York, where Cruz played a character called Snake Plissken, and what it meant was, and it's happening all over the world now.
Yep.
Whereas if you don't need, you're okay, but if you're in need, you've had it. Yeah. And the likes of what's happening now is you cannot live beyond your means. Our parents and grandparents didn't do that. That didn't exist in their day.
Yeah, got it. Changing times. John, thank you for that great call. Lots to tuck into on this one. The more we talk about this, why it's so great here at Talk, because these are the kind of issues that you begin with one premise or a basic question, then it flies off into all sorts of other little nooks, crannies and corridors. And the great British public, certainly our listeners to this station, are the very best at exploring some of those uncharted areas. Thank you to John in Cornwall. More calls on the way. Jeremy Kyle on the other side of the news. He'll be in before then to tell us more about what is happening on JK's Drive. But before all of that, it is time to find out once again how you could be in with a chance of winning. Are you ready for this, kids? £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
confident are you that Donald Trump, in talks with Putin and Zelensky, separately it would appear so far, could bring about peace in Ukraine within weeks, as Donald Trump claims? And what would that peace look like?
Now, the important thing, really important thing, is that President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are brought into these discussions. What would be an absolute disaster, very reminiscent of when Czechoslovakia was sold down the road in 1938, if a deal was done over the head of Ukraine, over the head of Zelensky.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Brad in Cambridge. If the police can't stop someone from marching out of a shop with what they know are stolen goods, why would they be able to enter a house looking for what they believe to be stolen goods? It's a very good shot. It's a very good point. And I don't even think it's I don't know how they deal with that, because the police aren't obviously there when the crime is committed. The police come after the crime is committed. It seems to be to appease that whole out-of-control sense. And stolen goods from shops, shoplifting that Brad's alluding to, I mean, you know, a tin of beans isn't usually electronically tagged, is it? So, I mean, you might nick a bottle of vodka that's got a tag on it, but that's a different kind of... That's a tag for a security barrier at a supermarket. So it probably wouldn't address any of that anyway. Ben is over here in Essex. What are your thoughts, Ben? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear, yeah.
Perfect, great stuff. Yeah, I don't think we should be paying any tax at all, Ian, until we've got full transparency on where that government spending is going. I think that should be a right for the public, and I think there's so much waste. And I think our tax system is oppressive. I think it's done on purpose because they don't want people like the Elon Musks being too powerful that can, you know, buy out social media platforms and have free speech and become, you know, influential people of government that can make decisions like this. I think that's why we pay so much tax, and it's oppressive.
So you would actually stop paying all tax of any description?
Yeah, I think we should, yeah. I think we should. And if there's an emergency like a war, then why don't we print it? Just print money and say, look, we're printing money, because the government do that anyway. You know, we're paying double tax. We pay unbelievable amount of tax on what we earn, what we sell, what we buy. You know, what we inherit, we pay tax on. It's oppressive. It's daylight robbery.
I mean, when you start to think about, have you ever done that? Yeah. You've probably done this. When you start to go, hang on, if you give me 100 quid, I pay tax on it, and then if I give somebody else that 100 quid, they pay tax on it, and you start to think, hang on, that's mental. I know, not suggesting that answers the problem, but or addresses the problem or highlights it, but you can go mad thinking about how weird tax is, right?
Absolutely, and I think until the government are completely transparent on where exactly every single penny goes, because it's a lot of it's getting wasted. All this overseas spending is ridiculous. I mean, it should be a flat rate, 5% throughout. You know, all business, all people, which I think would be fair. I know a lot of people might argue that, and there's probably a lot of nuance to that, but I think, you know, if there's not enough money, just print money for the purpose. Why can't the government say, right, we're at war, or we need to increase the, should we vote on printing more money, which will go exactly to that, you know, the industrial complex that builds all the tanks and guns?
Yeah.
Just print it. I mean, the government are printing money anyway, increasing inflation, overtaxing us. It's a joke. So no, I'm not happy about what Keir Starmer's saying. Yes, I do believe that spending more money on industry is a good thing because it puts more money into the economy.
Sure.
But I think Starmer's got a lot of skeletons in his closet, and I think he's, you know, until government are more transparent, I don't think anybody's happy about paying tax.
That's a fair point. I like it. Listen, great call. Ben, thank you very much. That's Ben in Essex. Andy says on Twitter, or X, the analogy of AI watering down music is like copying old magnetic tape audio or video recordings. More copies of copies you make, the worse the quality gets. I'm not sure it is an analogy, though, Andy, in that respect, because the problem with AI and its capabilities is that it gets better, not worse. So if you wanted to, you know, a couple of years down the line, you just type in release an album of Beyonce's greatest songs, tracks, whatever, but one that's never been heard before. It's going to come out in top quality. The entire orchestral backing will be there. The vocals, the harmonies, everything that goes with it. But it won't be Beyonce. It might not even be, it's not even Beyonce songs. It could just be something that sounds like Beyonce. It's so good that you think, well, I like Beyonce. Why would I not like this? Because it's the same. I think that is potentially the danger. Don't go away, David, with you in a second. By the way, a reminder that Premier League action comes to Talk this week. 2 exclusive football commentaries right here on Talk tonight. 7 o'clock, Wolves take on Fulham. Wednesday, it's Liverpool. They are, of course, right up there. They are. No one's going to catch them, mate, are they? They face Newcastle. Could be a tough fixture, though, for Liverpool. Both fixtures will be live and exclusive here on Talk. But, and here's the important bit, whilst you can enjoy some unrivaled commentary, because it always is on Talk, the whole Talk family have been doing it for years, absolute top-notch experts at this stuff, you won't miss Kevin O'Sullivan, because Kevin is going nowhere. He will still be here, but you can watch him and listen to him on YouTube. So make sure you flick across if that's what you want to listen to tonight. Ironic that the first game that we're covering tonight, Wolves-Fulham, is Kev's team. He's a diehard Fulham fan, but he'll be there on YouTube, so you can still watch him there from 7 o'clock this evening. Kev's absolute, unbeatable, never miss Political Asylum is still on at 7. David is in Ruislip. David, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
On that issue of crime, what are you thinking?
Well, a friend of mine had a Range Rover stolen off his drive, and it was tracked by the police. They lost the tracking for a bit, but then he retracked it with his Apple trackers. Mm-hmm. He knew exactly where the car was. Absolutely. He informed the police where the car was. We're talking about a 120 grand car.
Yeah.
So they knew where it was, but they didn't have any manpower to go and get it. So eventually, after 3 days, he had to go and get it himself and be in danger to go and do it. So
and he got it back.
Bother with a phone when they can't be bothered to go and get it.
Yeah, you see, I don't know what's happened to... Again, I think we all know. It's not like there's a couple of coppers having a bacon sandwich around the corner going, nah, can't be bothered, me. Because it doesn't get to... It doesn't happen like that. There's clearly a decision made somewhere, and that decision is that we either are not going to investigate or we literally don't have the manpower. I mean, certainly the latter point is true, because we've got rid of cops left, right and centre.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's the car sitting there, and he has to go and put himself in danger with his brother to go and get his own car.
Yeah, that's not how it's meant to be, is it? If you told somebody that 20 years ago, they think you'd gone mad. Listen, great call. Thank you for that, David in Ruislip. One comes in here from... in fact, no name given. No, more tax. No, they need to spend what we taxed now more wisely.
I think I'm going to shock you.
Go on.
What Trump said he was going to do is working, isn't it? Suddenly we're spending more money on defence. Suddenly it's coming forward. Suddenly we're cutting the foreign aid budget. Can I just actually... I never thought I'd do this on Talk.
Go on.
This isn't at Starmer's door, right? 14 years of Tory rule. They cut spending on defence year after year after year after year. I'm not sticking up for Starmer. I think he's a vile human being. But it's been going on for too long. And Trump has managed in, one short month. And hasn't he, to be fair?
And it's
before he goes to Washington, I'm going to spend that money. I'm bringing it forward to 2027. What does that tell you?
And then he parks a couple of tyres on the Reform and the Conservative lawn by going, I'm dipping into the foreign aid budget for this.
Richard's just tweeted, Richard Tice, saying that's exactly what we've been saying for 2 years. So, listen, it's interesting. So others would say he's listened and he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I think he should be more interested in the fact that his business secretary lied as well about his CV. Loads going on. How are you, my friend?
He is a solicitor, isn't he?
I hear you've got a cold.
How did you know this?
Well, because it's doing the rounds.
Well, I think I've got a cold. You know when you feel it in your own body?
Mrs. Kyle texted me, said he sounds rough. Ask him if he wants it rubbing, she said, your chest.
Yes, indeed. I've been suppressing sneezes.
Have you?
Throughout the course of the programme.
I also share that with the audience. Sneeze down the microphone.
Well, because we're in Vision now. I mean, before we were in...
Are we?
Yeah, did you not hear
No,
about
I didn't know we were in Vision.
Cameras. See these cameras? You thought they were like...
I've got used to them over the years. They're everywhere.
For my album.
Yeah?
No, you can't hide a sneeze, can you?
Yeah, that's okay, it's real. I've said to you before, these people on television, they think that you have to sit there like that. Just be real. You know, sneeze, let wind off, just do what you want to do. It's all going on.
Not very good on the 10 o'clock news, is it,
yes,
really?
listen, the defence boost. Keir Starmer seemingly has listened. We're now going to spend it up to 2.5% by 2027. Still not the 5% that Donald Trump wants. The BBC are still in my sights. Yesterday we broke that story that they spent £400,000 on that war zone documentary in Gaza. Yeah. And it was narrated by the 13-year-old son of a Hamas official. Still, they won't call them terrorists. They've also had to apologise again today for Tim Westwood, who, of course, actually says that he denies the behaviour ever amounted to bullying or harassment. This is a famous person who's been accused of all sorts of things. And the BBC, they should have been apparently looking at it in a much more interesting way. And new crime laws. I love this. Police are to get new powers to enter properties without a warrant. But will there be any policemen or women to do that?
Well, are they really going to knock down someone's door to get your mobile phone back? Have you ever had your mobile stolen?
Have you ever had your doors knocked in to get a phone back?
No, I haven't had nothing knocked in.
We've got it about us today, haven't we?
I've never.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever had. I've never had a phone. Yes, I did have a phone stolen.
Have you ever had the police raid your house?
No.
Good conversation.
You said that like I might have, like it was completely.
I sort of imagined somewhere in Collins Towers, the constabulary have come over the wall.
Well, I don't know what they'd be looking for.
No.
They'd be very disappointed. But a friend of mine did when they got the right number house. They got the wrong road. And
did they?
Yeah, he works in our industry.
Does he?
There was him and his wife.